As we're live streaming, I have to read out quite a bit of preliminaries. So I declare the meeting open, and this meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recording stored and made available to the public for later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation of being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language, and Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent, and under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recording of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. I'll ask you all to be upstanding now for the opening and acknowledgement of country by Councillor Peter Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And welcome Reverend Doug McPherson, Mittagong Presbyterian Church, who will open the meeting with prayer. Thank you, Reverend.
Let us pray. Dear Lord our God, you are everlasting and mighty. We give you thanks for the ability we have today to come to draw near to you in this time. We pray, O God, that you will continually guide and assist the Council in all that takes place. You are a great God who is highly to be praised. You judge fairly and you rule over heaven and earth and everything under it. Lord, we thank you that you forgive our sins when we confess our sins to you. Lord, we pray you would forgive us, restore and cleanse us. Help us day by day in all we do. Give us a spirit of charity, that we by your graciousness might consider others. Help us, Lord, as we know that every one of us have forgotten about our daily chores to you and our tasks of loving each other. Help us to walk in the ways of you, the living God, and be concerned for the welfare of all those around us in every situation. You know, Lord, that we are fully dependent upon you. We do pray that you would strengthen us, particularly in this very dry land at the moment. We pray for the farmers in particular. We ask, Lord, for rain for our country. We remember, Lord, that we are to call upon you as the giver of rain, as the provider and sustainer of the world, as the keeper of our continent. We look to you and we pray that you would help us and guide us. We pray, Lord, for your strength and grace to every part of this community, every organisation, every group, in every function. That, Lord, each might know of your grace and mercy, and help us to dwell together in a spirit of consideration for others. Dear Lord, help us to remember to serve you. Help us to value the people here in this district in the Wingecarribee Shire. And we pray for mercy to resolve all disputes, to seek your guidance. Give us wise counsel to listen to others, to hear the complaints and concerns of genuine people, and to have our ears opened and our eyes to see. You have made both the hearing ear and the seeing eye. So, Lord, we pray that you will guide our discussions and guard the Council in everything it does, in the conversation of one with another, in the conservation of our area, in the preservation of all that is good. And we pray for that peace of God which passes all understanding. Give to the Council wisdom in working plans, and guard over the hearts and the minds and motives of us all, that we might act in true charity give us a fresh vision here in this district for the welfare of our community. We do pray that you would bless all the council officers. We think of each one, and he mentioned to the Mayor, Councillor Gare, for Councillor Andrews, Halstead, McLaughlin, Markwart, Nelson, Scandrett and Whipper. We ask, Lord, that you would sustain and keep them all in their various needs and uphold them. We do pray for the General Manager and for all the management staff, for the various officials throughout our district. And there are many names there. You know them all, Lord. We pray that each might know your grace. We pray for all those who work in council, that they would know your strength and grace and help them as they deal face to face with the community, to act in a way of charity, justice and truth. And Lord, help us all to dwell together. Help us as members of this community to really seek to do that which is good and right for the welfare of all. We pray, Father, your grace, mercy and peace upon this council. Watch over all those who are sick. Guard and keep us from all trouble and hardship, and help us to listen to the wise counsel of others. We pray this in the name of our Saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend McPherson. Apologies. We have one apology from Councillor Gordon Markwart, moved by Councillor Nelson, second Councillor Scandrett. Any discussion? Put it all in favour. Those against, carried. We have the adoption of the previous minutes as held on the 24th of July 2019. Move Councillor Scandrett on the adoption of the correctness of those minutes. Second, Councillor McLaughlin. Any discussion? Put it all in favour. Those against, carried. Any business arising from the previous minutes? No business arising. Declarations of interest? Declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Now, before I go on to the mayoral minute, having watched a bit of the live streaming and knowing that there are quite a few people watching live streaming, I'll be reading the recommendations of the motion that's to be put, so people at least who are watching will know a little bit about what we're debating rather than just the item number. So in relation to that, we move on to the business paper, and the first one is, I have two mayoral minutes. One is the review of state government grant funding distribution to local government. Happy to move it if somebody would like to second it. Councillor McLaughlin, thank you. And basically the recommendation is the council submit a motion to the New South Wales Local Government Conference requesting that the New South Wales State Government review the methodology used when determining the level of funding which is distributed to councils, and that councils be invited to be part of the review process. And two, that the state government consider an annual allocation of funding to all councils across the state to reduce the complexity of funding programs, and that this annual allocation should take into consideration the size, population and infrastructure requirements of each council. And basically, as we know, when we put in for grants, we put in maybe for 250,000 and we get 175,000. And if we don't carry out the project, the community think that council's not interested, but we have to make up funding shortfalls, and we are waiting cap in hand on some of smaller funding to the state government, and I think that's just straight out wrong. I think we are supposedly the closest to the grassroots of the community, and we should know the wants and needs of that community when they put in for grant applications, as opposed to having to go to the state government looking for funding all the time on grants. So that's it in a nutshell. So on that note, I shall put the mayoral minute. All in favour? Against? Carried. 7.2, New South Wales State Government announcement of reversal of increase in emergency service levy. And sometimes we do have a win. And when we were out on exhibition with our annual budget, draft budget, and before I go any further, I better move that the Mayor write to the New South Wales State Premier and Minister for Local Government, thanking the New South Wales Government for listening to local councils and acting on the financial implications of the proposed emergency levy, and 2, that a letter of acknowledgement be written to the New South Wales Local Government Association, thanking them for advocating on behalf of all councils across the state. Second, Councillor Scandrett.
And I'd just like to ask you a question.
Yeah, and yes, you can ask a question.
Mr Mayor, I just want to ask, because the sceptic in me says that this might only be for a year, this waiving of this impost, and I just wonder whether you might be considering touching on that in your letter.
I think I probably will, Councillor Scandrett, and yes, your scepticism can come through, because I happen to really, they have only said it's for 1 year. And for the general community who may not know, we had an impost on us of $120,000 when we went out with the draft budget, which we were unaware of for emergency service levy, as was all councils across the state, which was going to give the state government 14.1 million, I think, in memory for the levy. And I think every council and every mayor throughout the state wrote a letter of condemnation that we would be running into a deficit, which we did do. We were running a $123,000 deficit as a sign of protest, and that has been reversed, and the state government will pick up the $14 million that they were going to raise. But Councillor Scandrett is right. Next year, we're going to have to find the $120,000 is the way I read it. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, it is only for 1 year. And I did hear on the news that the reason that the state government came to the party is the impact on those councils affected by the drought, and that councils had already set their budget. And they must have found that a real surprise that there was a drought on and that we'd already set our budget. So you'd think somebody in the state government would have known that. Anyway, Mr Mayor, look forward to a $123,000 bill coming next year.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. No more discussion. Put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? Carried. First item of the business paper. It is going to be a visitor matter, but it is. We have public forum as well. So, public forum is that you do not take questions, nor can councillors ask. Public forum is notice of motion re Milton Park, and Ms Karen Mitchell will address council in support of the recommendation. You're welcome to come forward. You've been told the rules. Okay, thank you. All right, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and councillors, thank you for providing the opportunity to support the motion put forward by Councillor McLaughlin to address the relentless concerns of the existing Milton Park community and move forward. Milton Park is a unique and iconic property promoting and attracting tourists to the Southern Highlands. Its heritage and gardens are recognised at a regional, state and national level for its significance historically, aesthetically and socially. Council set the standard to approve the original development in 1984 and meticulously facilitated the registration of various planning instruments to protect this property. Council equally considered Milton Park worthy of listing on Schedule 5 of the LEP, and if it is worthy of listing, it is no doubt worthy of protection. The hotel and Village 1 residents have formed a close and tight-knit community at Milton Park since UFAN commenced ownership of the approved tourist facilities in early 2014. We consider ourselves blessed to be part of this exclusive and historic estate. UFAN, with virtually all of the existing 20 owners in Village 1, will continue to work together to seek justice and protect all that Milton Park has to offer. In saying this, we cannot do it alone. We need the support and help of councillors and council alike to pass this motion to protect and preserve the future of Milton Park as originally intended. Time is of the essence and we cannot risk further delay. This review will benefit and positively impact on Council's reputation by ensuring procedural fairness to all parties while satisfying community expectations. In light of repeated modification applications, time-consuming review of applications and addressing numerous and repeated objections of the same nature, this review is the most cost-effective and efficient way Council can move forward while also addressing the concerns for existing approvals, which again impact on neighbours. The benefits to Council far outweigh the risks to Council and avoid potential liability and claims as a result of not enforcing compliance now. What is involved in Council in undertaking this legal review? We acknowledge the thought of a review is overwhelming, and at a first glance it appears costly and a lot of work. But let's not complicate this or blow it out of proportion. Council staff have the skills and knowledge to undertake this review in-house for minimal cost, referring to the LEP, prior New South Wales Supreme Court ruling, its own files, together with previous advice obtained, including joint planning and heritage reports by Shaw Reynolds, Council's lawyer who successfully defended its decision to refuse DA 161366. Council can set the boundaries and scope of works to minimise external legal costs. Ethical and procedural fairness. It would be nice to think competition was based on fair and reasonable grounds. We have the utmost respect for Council's policies and regulations. We do not question our compliance, as required, but please appreciate the owners of Milton Park have had to jump through hoops battling endless obstacles to protect Milton Park. For Council's benefit alone, UFAN has met at considerable cost in the takeover, upgrade and rebuild of sewerage operation after Tadillo's non-compliance, engaging specialist aviation lawyers to attend Council's review of existing helipad rights, and who can forget the issues around renewing the lease with Council to display business signage on Kangaloo Road. UFAN is currently in the Supreme Court defending its rights to operate the sewerage system in accordance with the relevant 88B instrument and to comply with Council's licence to operate due to Tadillo denying our rights to do so. Earlier this year, Council set a precedent reviewing the operations of the Mushroom Building in Mittagong, in which it exercised its powers as the regulatory authority for development compliance within Wingecarribee Shire Council boundaries. The same is needed here. Yet Council appeared to turn a blind eye to Tadillo and affiliates' tourist operations being conducted in farm buildings with significant financial benefits obtained by the rural rating category of its property, yet with a predominant business use of tourist accommodation and property development. Furthermore, they openly declare the expansion of tourist accommodation with LUA 110869 being used for this purpose, although approved for the residential purposes only. Council incurs a financial loss in allowing this, and our community also suffers both financial disadvantage and operation issues with parking, water services, and other impact on infrastructure required to service this. Trust me, I am not someone who likes to be in the spotlight, but sometimes we all have an ethical and moral obligation to step outside of our comfort zone. Councillors, while it may be less complex to take the easy road, we believe it is time to take the ethical road and set the standard for the future. We urge councillors to support this motion in the best interest of all parties. We can work together to turn this situation around and minimise loss.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to item 12.3, multi-dwelling house development, Sheffield Street, Barrel, and Mr John Hewer will address council in support of the recommendation. Mr Hewer, you can come forward. yourself down, sir.
Mayor and councillors, and everyone present, I've only, with regards to this development, we're an abutting neighbour and we have a development there also. Now, I realise that there's all the things that go into this, and we reached a stage where it looks as though it's pretty much complete and there's no doubt everything's gone into. It's just that I want to raise some concerns, and I'm not too clear on certain things, namely which trees are going to be left or not. We were told there was going to be some trees left, but by looking at the paperwork, it doesn't look as though there's any. And the other major concern, which it won't affect us, but I'm surprised that it's got this far, and that is that on the northern building line of the property in question, the boundary of the actual building line is only 2 metres from their northern boundary, and it's heavily overshadowed with the buildings that we have. And I'm just hoping that all this has been gone into thoroughly, because you do have a situation where our units are 0.9 from the boundary, and these proposed ones are going to be 2 metres. Therefore, you've got less than 3 metres, and we're looking directly north, and our buildings are up there. And if you look at the buildings that are proposed, it's basically all their living areas. This time of the year, for instance, they will be in the shade, and quite heavily in the shade. And I'm just hoping that these things have been properly addressed, because the way I would look at it is, if you built something like this and you go to sell it and you get somebody into the house, I mean, the ones next door are up there. And I don't know if there's anyone here from the developers on this particular thing or not. And,
Well, we can't. This is a public forum.
Okay, all right.
So you can pose the question,
Yeah.
and councillors may want to ask that question to staff
Yeah.
when the item comes up on the agenda.
All right, well then all I would ask is that it's closely looked at, and make sure that everything has been done, and that the people developing it are fully aware of how it's going to end up. And as regards to the trees, I've got a piece of paper that shows the trees to be removed, and by the look of it, pretty much everything is going to be removed now, whereas originally there were some trees to be held. I just want to have a little say here, in public forum, whatever, and I don't know whether anything can be done about it or anybody's interested, but I think it's concerning to have one house to the north of you less than 3 metres.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now we move another public forum item, notice of motion in relation to removal of trees in Mary Street. Mr Brian Smith will address council in support of the recommendation. Mr Smith. How do you do?
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for your time this afternoon. I speak on behalf of my daughter and son-in-law today regarding the request by council to submit an arborist report and the removal of dangerous trees. First and foremost, I am putting the council general manager and all councillors on notice that I will hold you all personally responsible for any injury, death or property damage to myself or my family regarding this matter. Upon receiving the arborist report, the council took it upon themselves to reject the report. Council employee Charlene stated that the trees were protected because of koalas. She informed us that she came out to investigate the trees herself and she didn't see a problem with them. Matt, another council employee, came out to investigate. He told us the removal should never have been knocked back and that he was stumped, pardon the pun, as to why it had been rejected. Mark Pepping stated the council staff inspected the trees and have assessed the trees are healthy specimens and show no sign of deterioration as a result of building works. Among other things, the arborist has stated that the council should never have approved my daughter's plans with these trees so close to the house. They were also not a koala feed species and were not protected whatsoever. I would like to know why my daughter had to waste $1,100 for a report council has taken absolutely no notice of. The trees exhibit indicators that recovery is unlikely and retention poses an unacceptable risk to persons and property. Therefore, the recommendation is for removal. Contrary to council's beliefs, these trees, Eucalyptus quadrangulate, whatever it is, are not listed as a koala feed tree species. The trees were assessed for any existing or potential habitat. There was no apparent cavities or hollows suitable for habitat. No nests were found in the canopy of the trees, and there was no evidence of bird browsing activity on any branches. How are James and Maddie supposed to get an occupation certificate when the arborist report indicates that the trees pose a danger to human life? There can be no safety with the way this development has been approved. Any pedestrian now has to walk on the road as there are no footpaths. These developers have now submitted another application for 6 more blocks down the back. Where are these residents going to walk? On the road, because council neglected to take into account any future development when approving the first one. Apparently, Duncan Gare mentioned on the councillor's site visit that he wouldn't like these trees around his house. He also apparently said that if they didn't like the trees, they should have bought elsewhere. Maddie and James are more than happy to have trees around, but didn't know until a report had been done that the trees were unsafe. In closing, as a very concerned father and grandfather, I urge council to use common sense in the decision they reach regarding the removal of or retainment of these trees, because your decision may have far-reaching repercussions for each and every councillor and council's general manager. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to visitor item 9.1, review of refused boarding house development 2 Walker Street. Ms Sonia Carvanale will address council for the recommendation. I thought we had those to speak against first.
I understand that council today is looking to review and refuse the development at 2 Walker Street. I am the neighbour in 4 Walker Street. We have several concerns about the development and the amount of traffic that it is going to create, in particular to Walker Street. At the moment, if you ever walk down Walker Street during business hours, you will see that there is not a car park to spare. We have a private car park, which is often abused as a result of the fact that there is no car parks to spare. And while I understand that the development is there because of its proximity to the station, the transport links down here are too unreliable and infrequent to be that residents would be able to rely on those services as opposed to having a car in that street. So obviously we're concerned about the traffic. Also, if you walk up and down Walker Street, you'll see that there is nothing else that is multi-storey in Walker Street. Personally, as the property owner, we are concerned about the towering nature of this development and the fact that we will lose all our sunlight to our north-facing windows, which are basically all the windows in our building. Our concern is because our block is very narrow and there is no parking, what building works would do to the street and how much chaos that would cause for the interim period. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, you take questions if anyone.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Does any councillor have any questions? Councillor.
I'm Turland.
Yeah, Councillor
I was
Turland.
missed earlier. This is your property here?
Correct.
I thought so. I just wanted to confirm that's your
Yes.
property, so now I can look at the elevations and actually see.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrick.
Thank you for your presentation. Could I ask if there was a remedy to include additional car parking there? Would that go a fair way towards satisfying your concerns, or is that to say that the car parking is not your major concern?
No, the car parking is our major concern. Our also secondary concern, which I should have mentioned, is security and the increased amount of people that the project would bring to the street. I, as a business owner, work in that building. I often work late. If I'm overshadowed, I will now have concerns about working late, and the fact that we can be seen in, like, privacy to our business is very, very is important. It is key to our business, and if we've got security issues, then we have business issues as well.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you this time. Mr Andrew Loden will address council against the recommendation. Oh, this is back to front. Take yourself down. Okay, away you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Just to give you a brief history of the application, it was lodged in November 2017. We took 12 months to get a refusal back in late last year, 2018, November 2018. There was a list of points raised by council at the time. So we have resubmitted, and still we get a recommendation for refusal based on items which we've complied with the SEP housing, affordable housing guidelines. In all the time this application's been in council, we've never been able to have a face-to-face meeting with council to discuss these issues. In our most recent Section 8.2 submission, we address all these issues, including, in particular, the 800 metre situation, which brings into play an accessible site. There's dispute about the distance measured from our site to the Barrel Station. We've actually got an independent planner involved who's used mere maps and 6 maps to draw a conclusion that we're actually under the 800 metres, so 790 odd metres to the concourse on where the lifts are situated on the railway station. Our biggest point is we would ask council to defer this so we could meet with the council officers and discuss this further. We're happy also to get a registered surveyor engaged to confirm this distance. In the recent Section 8.2, we've also addressed the minimum gross floor area issue, the insufficient bicycle parking. It should be noted that there was it's a moot point, but we required to provide 4 bicycle spots for the site. Council insisted we provide 5. We've provided 5. But minor issues like this has sort of padded out the argument against us. We've met with the desired character of the surrounding buildings. We've addressed the earthworks. The geotechnical at an early DA stage is not really required. Issues like traffic impact, again, we've complied with the SEP guidelines, providing 1 space per every 5 units in the development. The intent of the development is obviously, as part of the New South Wales legislation, is to provide a mix of different housing types. Given that we're on a site very close to the centre of Barrel, it's a prime spot for that to occur. So from here on, we just ask that council today, the outcome would be to give us a deferment and further consideration for the opportunity to meet face to face with the council officers and understand how this direction has been chosen. Thank you.
Okay. Oh yes, you've got a question coming up. Councillor Scandrick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could I ask you about car parking? Were you to be asked in that discussion that you seek to provide more car parking, how would you do that? Would you have to sacrifice a couple of rooms? to go under the undercroft?
Look, that's all up for debate, but yeah, if we were to meet with council and discuss it further, possibly, but I'd have to get guidance from my client. I mean, as per the SEP guidelines, we're actually in compliance with the amount of parking required.
Right. And in terms of our discussion over the distance and the walking up to the station, has there been any discussion regarding the laneway that's near you and being involved in providing a footpath to that?
No, there wasn't. That was actually one of the points. We actually originally had used the laneway to gain access, and it was well under the 800 metres. We've then done further studies where we've actually gone back up on Bong Bong Road, and we can still get to the train station within the 800 metres.
The laneway you could
quite easily get there, yeah.
If there was a footpath
there. You could do, yes. And it's actually reduces the distance slightly as well.
And that could be an item of discussion as well, that footpath.
For sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
Look, I just read in the concluding remarks, it says here, with some additional amendments undertaken to the current proposal, this development would satisfy the requirements of the SEP and would be supported by staff. So when you go, I think there's a move, I'm happy to support a deferment, but you'll have to go to the staff and you'll have to be thinking about making concessions on your development for it to get past council again. So when you go to those discussions with staff, you'll need to be thinking...
Quick question, Councillor Nelson.
Would you be prepared to make consider making concessions when you meet with staff?
Well, look, I think we're all considerations on the table. I talk with my client and we'd work our way through it for sure.
Well, we will see when it comes back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, look, this is all we've got to work with at the moment. That's the plans we've given at the moment. Can you tell me what's actually happening in the front here in Walker Street?
So the front of the site, the building sits towards the back. The front is where the parking and access to the site is at.
So this is we don't have it. That's all I've got at the moment.
Oh, okay.
On my plans anyway. So you're telling me this is where all the parking is going to go?
Correct, at the front.
The building that currently is going to go is being taken down.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Done. Who's the late one? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, just with regard to the objector, is there any way you can consider something about the overshadowing, the height of the building with regard in your discussions with council staff? That seems to be a concern from your neighbour.
Again, yeah, we'll address that issue if need be and work our way through it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll give them one more go if there's any late starters. No, you're right. Thank you, councillors. I'll ask staff to do a quick introduction on this in relation to, and the recommendation is review of refused boarding house development 2 Walker Street, Bowral. And the recommendation is that the review of determination application 17/16/79.01 under section 8.2 of the Environment Planning and Assessment Act for the proposed boarding house at lot 2, etc., be refused for reasons as described in the attachment of the report. Can we have an introduction, please, Mr. Wilton, through you, General Manager?
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider a Section 8.2 application which seeks to review the determination of DA 171679, which sought consent for a 20-room boarding house development at 2 Walker Street, Bowral. That application was subsequently refused by Council in November last year. The site is Zone B4 mixed use, and the boarding houses are permissible with development consent under the State Environmental Planning Policy Affordable Rental Housing 2009. The site occupies an area of 1,026 square metres and is located within an area characterised by low-scale residential housing and also professional commercial suites. Councillors would be aware that the merits of the proposal that is existing includes the proposed construction of 3-storey, 19-room boarding house facility with communal lounge, manager's office, provision for 4 car spaces and also bike parking facilities. The proposal remains broadly the same as what was originally proposed in the original DA that was refused on the 6th of November 2018, which cited issues concerning accessibility, geotechnical concerns, suitability, streetscape character, and also car parking and also the public interest. Council staff have identified a number of issues within the current application, including, again, car parking control departures, identifying a shortfall of up to 6 car spaces, accessibility issues where a defined transport point is outside of the 800-metre prescriptive standard, and concerns relating to streetscape character, and also departures from Council's cut and fill controls within the DCP. The application was notified for a period of 28 days and 12 submissions were received, which are detailed in the report. And given the reasons for the refusal of the earlier application have not been adequately addressed, Council staff have recommended that the decision relating to the earlier development application be upheld.
Thank you, Mr Wilton. Questions to Mr Wilton? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Through you, Madam GM, to Mr Wilton. With regard to the boarding house, I wonder what the tenure is for people that... can it be used for like an Airbnb or short stay visits? I'm just concerned about the neighbours talking about the security of the property. I'm just wondering how that would operate.
Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, generally there'll be a management plan that's associated with these, but at the end of the day, boarding house facilities can be used for short stays, it can be used for longer periods.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Turlin.
Look, again, my plan is horrible. I can't see anything. Can't see any parking. Can't see... That's all I've got, and I can't even read what's on there. The photocopy's just useless for me. All I can say is that I would think... Well, my question to you is then, why did it take 12 months? Have you met with the applicants face-to-face to go through any outstanding issues that they might have had, that you might have been able to compromise through the process to date?
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, the original DA, I believe that there was communication between not only the applicant but also the Council in relation to the DA. Unfortunately, those issues that were raised were unable to be resolved, and it resulted in the application being refused.
Thank you. All right, so we have a recommendation.
I'll
Councillor...
move an amendment. The amendment is deferred.
No, it won't be an amendment, it'll be the motion.
It'll be the motion, but I'm asking for it to come up as requested before.
Okay, then, so the application be...
No, it's it.
be deferred.
That's it.
For...
There it is there now. In front of us.
Okay, so that's the recommendation. As moved by Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. To enable to be deferred to enable the applicant and staff to continue to seek ways to amend the proposal that complies with planning requirements. Yeah, I think that's a sensible recommendation. Is there any debate to it? Councillor Turlin?
Well, look. All I'll say is that it is better value that all parties get together and get to an agreed position, which is what it should be. But what frustrates me, and probably everybody else, that it takes 12 months to get to that point. You know, we're already lodged in the court. I understand the applicant's lodged in the court for January next year, and that's a shame. The 88-2A review is brought it back to us today, but it's a shame that there couldn't have been more conversations between the party. It would seem that car parking would be the biggest issue. Knowing what B4 you can do in it, you can build pretty well from boundary to boundary, because if it's commercial, the property next door is built right on the boundary. This is the one on the southern side, the lady who spoke. She's built on her southern boundary pretty well close too. So parking, I think, is the only issue that needs to be resolved there. And if that can be done by reducing the numbers of units, or it would have been nice for us to have a look at the parking that was proposed, but I can't even read this, so it's nothing for me. But anyway, I'm hoping that the motion gets forward and that everybody gets together and saves council and the community a lot of money.
Thank you. Councillor Scandra.
Mr Mayor, I'll be supporting the motion to defer, but I do want to just strengthen what has been said. I do think we've got to look for additional parking because of the complexities in the street, and that will be a voluntary discussion, I think, with the applicant. I hear what we've done so far. I also think we have to look at that walking. That's another method of getting around in terms of...
Well, perhaps, Councillor Scandra, you could suggest to the mover that the areas be deferred, such as... After the word requirements, with planning requirements, such as
pedestrian
movements,
Pedestrian footpaths to...
Parking, height,
Okay, pedestrian footpaths to the laneway.
what laneway?
It's Argyle Laneway, I think it is, isn't it?
Argyle laneway.
Thank you. And Colin, and car parking, not only to comply with the SEP, but to try and relieve some of the car parking stress in this.
I don't think you should need to put that in. I
Okay,
think
well, car parking. Just put car parking.
Well, just car parking.
Additional car parking.
Yeah,
Okay.
just car parking.
Yeah, and I think that'll do. Thank you, if that's all
The
right
other
with
one
you.
was overshadowing.
It's exactly what the staff are going to do anyway. If you want to write an
Yeah, I think then you know what you've discussed.
They can't approve it without the car parking comply.
Thank you, councillor. Will you accept that, including pedestrian access, car parking and height, or overshadowing? Thank you, councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, happy to see the applicant go back and talk to the staff, but I'd like to refer the applicant to page 12 of the report, and there's a number of items there where it doesn't meet and provides the staff to refuse the application. So, and parking's been mentioned. He might want to only supply 4 or 5, but he might want to think about supplying more parking and decreasing the height. We were on a site visit there today, and you know, those earthworks are going to be working overtime to get a building in there. It's a very steep situation, so discussion's a two-way street, and you know, pre-lodgement meetings could sort out a lot of these problems. But anyway, good luck to the applicant and the staff, but heed the report.
Thank you, councillor Nelson. Any further comment? Then before your right of reply, councillor Turland, do you want any right of reply? Yeah, I think the applicant and the consultant are in the room, and they've heard the debate of council and the concerns, and I'm sure they'll be working to try and get some form of accommodation in that area. So the recommendation, as moved by councillor Turland and seconded by councillor McLaughlin, put it all in favour. Those against, carried. And as a planning matter, so everybody's got to show their vote. It's unanimous. Thank you. 11.2, proposed licence agreement to Big Fat Smile Group. 11.1. Operation of Shire's public swimming pool centres. I'm going to read the recommendation so that those who are not present are still available to what's being discussed. The council approved the seasonal duration and operational hours and reasons for variations of those hours as outlined in the report. And 2, that the pool season duration and operational hours will be actively promoted to the community. So it's operation as Shire's public swimming centres. Moved by councillors Nelson and Halstead. Is there any discussion? Then I put it all in favour. Those against, carried. We move to page 35, 11.2. Proposed licence agreement to Big Fat Smile Group, Part Burgess Street, Bundanoon, and that it is a licence agreement to be offered to the Big Fat Smile Group Limited for occupation of Part Burgess Street, Bundanoon, adjoining the Bundanoon Preschool for a period of 17 years, and that the General Manager and Mayor be delegated to execute the licence agreement. Any questions? No. It's been moved and seconded by Councillors Whipper. Been moved by Councillor Whipper.
No, it was moved by me.
Councillors Scandrett and Whipper. No discussion? Put it. All in favour?
All right.
Those against? Carried. 11.3, proposed licence agreement to the Good Yarn Incorporated front shop as Part 13 Railway Avenue, Bundanoon. Basically, the recommendation is to enter into a 5-year licence agreement for the operation of this particular shop in 13 Railway Avenue, Bundanoon. Moved by councillor Scandrett, seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. Any discussion? Councillor Turlin.
You going to speak? No. Well, the member for where I hear is so quick anything to do with Exeter and Bundanoon. It's just amazing that that this is another lease, which I think is good for 5 years. It's not 25 years, it's not 99. But it's a good thing. So I commend the member for where I for getting in so quick. Anything to do with Bundy, Exeter, good stuff.
There we go. Okay, we did start off on a even footing there. Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Put it all in favour. Those against, carried. We move to page 43, 11.4, tender for construction of 2 bridges, Marilla, New South Wales. Why it says New South Wales, I'm not sure. Moving option 1, that the tender in relation to the report be adopted. That was recommended in closed committee. So before anybody wish to speak to it? So moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Turlin. Is there any discussion to it? Then I put it. All in favour, against, carried. And I'll ask the General Manager to read out that recommendation.
And the recommendation that Council has now adopted is that Council accepts the tender from Kenpass Pty Limited at a lump sum price of $1,234,575 excluding GST to undertake construction of 2 bridges, Marilla, New South Wales.
And if people wonder about council being looking after those who have poor roads or what we do, there is 4 ratepayers at the end of that $1.4 million construction of those 2 bridges. So we move on to page 12.1, development of applications determined from the 27th of June 2019 to 29 July 19. Move McLaughlin, Councillor Andrews. Is there any discussion on those that have been determined? And
Well, the discussion I've got is why do we even have this in the report? They've been approved. I don't know
yes,
why...
well, that is a very good point, Councillor Turlin, and if you were to suggest that once they've been approved, there's no need for them to come back to council in a business paper, I will support that.
Well, I'll add that to the motion. We don't need it.
They've been determined.
Mr Mayor, look, I hear what Councillor Turlin's saying, but what I like about this too, there is information about the ones that were rejected and why they were rejected. And I think that's something that...
Maybe just the ones that have been refused.
Well,
maybe we review how the format...
It's nice to know what's... But the public gets to read this, Mr Mayor.
Too controversial, I'll put a motion.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll discuss this, Councillor Turlin. Okay, so we have that as a recommendation. Put it all in favour, those against, carried. We move to page 69, 12.2, development applications received from the 27th of June 2019 to 29 July 19. Move Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Questions? Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the one in Mary Street that I found here earlier today. I think it was 70-something.
74.
74, was it? Was it 74?
Yes, it's up in the... It's in the...
Yeah, no, but what I...
69 Mary Street.
Yeah, what I want to make sure that... Yeah, 74, there it is there. Is to make sure that this particular development and developer and any other buildings or properties proposed in that area, that we get a master plan for the whole lot of it, so we don't have this piecemeal 2 blocks here, another 5 blocks there, which are causing problems in relation to the Mary Street that we heard today from one of the applicant's fathers. But I just would like to think that this will be coming back in some form of a master plan. Now, I don't know if you want me to put that in the motion.
Well, we'll put that through to a question, a comment from staff. Mr Wilton, through the General Manager.
Through the Chair, yes, we will be requesting a master plan of that applicant, and we'll also provide a weekly circular to provide more information to councillors in relation to that outcome.
Can we ask for a master plan for all the rural land around here, so it's just not perhaps some idea how many blocks are going to be eventually done there?
Through the General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the chair, we'd definitely ask the question, but at the end of the day, it depends on speculation with different developers.
All right, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, my questions relate to number 8, number 11, the Waterbrook development, and I was just wondering if I can ask the question, which I've just written down here. Can a development application that has not become operational because of a deferred commencement condition then be modified before the consent becomes operational?
Through the General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the chair, when a development application is subject to a deferred commencement, yes, it can be modified prior to an operational consent being issued. Just means that they can't act on that their consent until such time it does actually satisfy those deferred consent conditions.
Am I allowed to have a second one, Mr Mayor? Just with regard
seeing
to-
you're behaving yourself,
Thank
Councillor.
you. I was just wondering, Mr Wilton, those objectors to this development that wrote in, are they in the process of being notified about this development and their options that will tell them how that they can how they appeal the process?
The chair, yes, that is correct. The notification letters have gone out in relation to that determination by the Joint Regional Planning Panel. The JRPP used to advise people that would submit objections to council or where there's been comment made to council in relation to support as well. But given the changes that have occurred in relation to the JRPP operational guidelines, council's now responsible for that, and we've made sure that's occurred in relation to
So that must have just slipped through the net somehow.
That's
that one.
correct, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Question on page 78, item 81. It relates to the National Trust property at Goldenvale Road. Is there any reason why that one is not coming to council for determination? Yeah. If we could call it up.
78, page
81.
81.
Yep, on page 78.
Yep, yeah. Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Wilton. Any reason why that can't be called up?
Through the chair, that's a matter for council if they wish to call it up. We're more than happy to take that to full council.
All right. So if we can...
No, you won't need a form. It's being done through council.
Okay. Yep, all right.
So it's when it's outside a council meeting or outside a briefing session, and it's not endorsed by council, it needs the form to be filled out.
So if we can call that, yep, I'm happy to move that that's called up.
All right, so...
Second for that.
Yes, they're in the recommendation. Be careful what you move. Councillor Turlin.
Just a question to staff again. On the Waterbrook one, any deferred commencement, you cannot apply for a 455 variation to a deferred commencement condition, correct or not?
Through the chair, in relation to the deferred commencement conditions, yes, they can be modified.
So you can apply for it?
That's correct.
Okay. Oh, I didn't. I thought that would be locked in. It's only the ones that are not deferred. Okay.
Thank you. No more questions in relation to that? Then I put it all in favour. Those against carried. We move to 12.3, page 80. Multi-dwelling housing development 1921 Sheffield Road, Bowral, DA 17/1713. And the recommendation is that the application in relation to dwellings on 1921 be approved, subject to the conditions as described in attachment 1 to the report. Before I go to questions, somebody happy to move it, or you want to go move? Councillor Andrews, seconded.
Okay.
Councillor Turlin. So I'll go to questions if anybody wants a question. Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, look, the question I've got to staff is that the question was related to overshadowing from the property to the north and the distance from the boundaries. I would assume that you've covered both of those items under the... It's not the department design guide, but it would be another guide that you would be following. SPF. Okay, that's the question.
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the chair, yes, those matters have been considered in terms of both overshadowing and also distance to property boundaries. Both are compliant. In relation to overshadowing, they're able to get 3 hours of natural sunlight in any of the living rooms of the adjoining premises for a period of 3 hours at the winter solstice.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've inspected the site, we've looked at it, it's come, we've discussed it, so if no debate, I put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to page 136, 12.4, amend the provisions for senior housing controls in the township and village development control plans. And the recommendation is that the draft development control plan amendment accompanying this report relating to seniors housing be placed on public exhibition, and because of the comments in relation to another development in Collivale, I think Councillor like a short introduction. Councillor Scandett's asking it. You have changed positions with Mr. Wilton.
While you
Over
weren't
to
looking.
you, Michael.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Councillors, this report relates to draft amendments to our town and village development control plans. It's recently come to our attention that the seniors housing provisions contained within our towns and village development control plans were inadvertently left out of both the Penrose and Wingelow and the Northern Villages Development Control Plan, and the draft amendments are seeking to incorporate the same provisions into those two DCPs to ensure consistency amongst our development control plans for our towns and villages. It's also proposing to remove any reference to the seniors housing set contained within our DCP. While it's perfectly legitimate for a DCP to make reference to provisions in a set, it has become increasingly a point of confusion amongst the community, and it serves no real purpose, so we're proposing to remove that reference as well.
Any questions to Mr. Park? Councillor Scanlon? No? Questions? Councillor...
I'd like a bit of an explanation, a bit more than that. If you were sitting up in that gallery there and you heard what you just said, you wouldn't have a clue what went down. Right, now DCPs for a start, LEPs, you might just explain them, then you went SEPPs, you didn't even say that, you said SEPs, so no one's got a clue what you're talking about. But above and beyond that, can you give us some examples of some of the things in terms of the senior housing that were left out and now going to be in? And again, the people sitting up there might have some idea what's just gone down, otherwise it's, you know, gobbledygook.
Councillor Halstead, through you to Mr. Park.
Thank you, and through the Chair, Councillors, the Development Control Plan is what guides development within the Shire, so it sets development controls which will guide the built form, particularly for seniors living development. Each of our towns and villages have controls specifically relating to seniors housing, and they control the design, the scale, and ensure that development is in keeping with the community's expectations. Unfortunately, when we went from a DCP for each type of development to site-specific DCPs or locality-specific DCPs, the seniors housing controls, which again controlled the built form and how these developments look and feel and set clear guidelines about what we expect in terms of development, they were left out of 2 of the development control plans. So we have I think 15 or so development control plans. The controls are in 13 of those 15s. We're now replicating those controls into the 2 other development control plans.
Thank you. Councillor Scander, question? Councillor Nelson.
Thanks. When we pass this recommendation tonight, how long does it take to come into effect?
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr. Park.
Through the Chair. So, Councillors, the recommendation is for the draft amendments to go on public exhibition. That is a minimum period of 28 days. We have to obviously notify that in the paper, so we're probably looking at the best part of 2 months before we could get a report back to Council. That would be somewhat dependent on the level of feedback we receive as part of the exhibition as well.
Public can find out about the couple of...
Councillor Nelson. Councillor Scandrett.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm going to move the recommendation there, but I'd hope that council might consider, based on responses, holding a public information session on this where people could ask questions, just to give some clarity in this. It's been a constant thorn in our side in certain locations, so that might be an opportunity the staff might like to consider.
Thank you. Well, that's a suggestion. Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, look, I know there's a senior living policy that's been floating around. I actually got it at home, but I didn't bring it tonight. It'd be advisable if we can actually get that policy plan to all councillors and maybe make it available to the community. It's already in place. We actually have it. In 2009, I believe. I've got it back at home, but didn't bring it tonight. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, so the question is, can the that policy be, put on the website or? Well, yes, we all should have one. Okay. Yeah, I don't. This is not to do with the policy. This is to do with planning.
I understand that. That'd be nice.
Okay, then can we?
No, it's not the set. It's council. I'll bring it to you tonight.
All right. Subject to the discussions between Councillor Turlin and staff to see whether it can be distributed. I know I have one at home, so don't bring one to me. Councillor McLaughlin.
Are we in debate?
We are now.
Oh, good. Well, look, I'm happy to support this, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, well, you need a mover and second.
Oh, well, I'm happy to
You're
move.
moving it,
I'm happy
and
to move
Councillor
Okay.
Nelson, the Councillor Scandrett and Nelson.
Look, I'm
mover
happy.
and seconder.
My only concern with regard to this, Mr Mayor, is that we don't just pay lip service to what was set up with these seniors living and people with disabilities. They have to have infrastructure around them. We can't allow people to abuse the system. In a lot of places, it's seen as putting high density on low density areas. And my concern is the infrastructure needs to be there. And as I said last week, with regard to one that came up in one of our villages, it was relying on a bus service in a small village. Now, if that bus service has ceased for any reason, then it didn't comply. That was my point. And my point, I think, we can't just pay lip service to that. The SEP was put in place for those people to have an infrastructure around them. We don't want elderly and frail and people with disabilities living in outlying spots where there's no opportunity, when they can't drive anymore, that they haven't got the resources to get into town, and there's none of the infrastructure. So I think that should be part of it, and we've got to be concerned that we don't lose sight of that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Then my comment to you, Councillor McLaughlin, is going on exhibition, and that is the time for any members of the public to make comment, and perhaps you could make a submission to council. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, well, actually the item that Councillor McLaughlin's talking about was Collovale, where some 27 rooms were being erected there, where the house opposite would only have 7 rooms. So that's just my calculation. So a substantial thing. And if you look at this report, page 139, neighbourhood amenity and streetscape, it says there that the draft must maintain reasonable neighbourhood amenity and appropriate residential character by providing building setbacks, using building form and siting that relates, adopting building heights at the street frontage that are compatible in scale with adjacent development. I say again, 27 rooms, 7 rooms. There's a good example, and adjoining. So I welcome this, and I do hope that we can have a public forum where the public can come in and ask the tricky questions.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. Is it a planning matter? It is. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. 12.5, Heritage Assessment of Rochester Park, 102-104 Old Wingelow Road, Mundanoon. Interim Heritage Order number 10, and the recommendation is long and complicated, but the first bit is The council supports the proposed heritage listing of Rochester Park, House and Garden, Bundanoon, comprising lot 32, DP 1205423. Can we have an introduction, please? Mr. Pepping?
Yeah, through the General Manager. The purpose of this report, councillors, is to recommend a planning proposal be prepared on the property known as Rochester Park, 102 to 104 Old Wingelow Road, Bundanoon. The property, as it sits at the moment, is roughly around 2 hectares. It has a 1920s arts and crafts style house on it with a substantial amount of landscaping around the property. In 2003, there was a subdivision approved to the south of the remaining property, which resulted in approximately 33 residential properties, building blocks created. And those blocks, as we saw today, are under construction as we speak, with a number of houses being built on them. So the remaining property that was kept was the subject earlier this year of a 12-lot subdivision for 700 square metre lots. That particular subdivision application has since been withdrawn. This property was identified back in 2008 as part of a heritage survey of the whole Shire as a site that is worthy of heritage listing. And through the process of engaging with the owners of all of those proposed heritage items, engaging with the councillors, a number of decisions were made which resulted in this property not being heritage listed at that time, but it was still part of the list. The concern of the staff at this, as it is now, is that this development obviously has development potential, and there is a concern that the heritage significance of the property would be diminished if the development was, any subdivision and development was to go ahead, particularly in regard to the substantial gardens that surround this property. So the recommendation before you is to prepare a planning proposal. The interim heritage order was created at the beginning of this year, and if council doesn't act in the 6-month period, it will lapse. If council does resolve to prepare a planning proposal, the interim heritage order will last for a further 6-month period to enable that process to continue. The second part of the planning proposal, which isn't related to the interim heritage order as such, but it's to increase the minimum lot size that affects this subject property from 700 square metres up to 1 hectare in order to limit the development potential of this block. As part of the options that have been presented to the councillors, in option 1, which does include the 1 hectare subdivision, and that's the recommendation of the report, staff have provided other alternative options that council may wish to consider, which is either a 2,000 square metre minimum lot size, a 4,000 square minimum lot size, or an 8,000 square metre minimum lot size. If there are any further questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions to Mr. Pepping?
Yeah, I am.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I'll ask a question if I can. Mr. Pepping, so if we move anything other than a 1 hectare subdivision, then we have the potential of losing some of the heritage garden, is that correct?
That's what we believe, so yes.
Yeah, okay, that's my question.
That's it, it's your question. Councillor Turland.
This was the subdivision that was proposed, which was removed.
That's correct.
You guys provided it to me. Would you see any objection if there was only 4 lots put into that same section?
I wouldn't like to speculate on the floor. That would have to be assessed to determine what sort of impact that would have on the house and the gardens.
Well, my amendment will be that where it says in item 3, from 7 to 1.
Wait a minute.
I'll flag that.
It's all right.
Councillor, recommendation, I want to get a second of a Councillor McLaughlin now, which I didn't get. Councillor Scandrett. So the recommendation as printed, moved by Councillor McLaughlin and seconded by Councillor Scandrett. Now we have an amendment.
The amendment will be from 700 square metres.
What number, Councillor Turl?
Number 3.
In number 3?
Yeah, basically changing 700 to 2,000 square metres and I would suggest 4 lots. It's just a plan I just
Okay, yeah. Okay, wait until that goes up so everybody's familiar with it. Okay, so you're happy with that as the amendment, Councillor Turland?
Sorry?
You're happy with the wording in that from 700 square metres to 2,000 square metres?
With a maximum of 4 lots.
With a maximum of 4 lots? Including the house?
No, these are just extra lots of 2,000 square metres. So
Well, that has to be defined as...
Yeah, defined. The house will then be on...
4 lots, not including the existing house curtilage or house and curtilage. Right. So councillors Turland, that is the amendment.
Then you've got to change. You've got to change number 2.
Yeah, number 2.
Take it out.
Yeah, really, that should nearly come out altogether.
Take it out.
You happy now? Now, do you have a second, Councillor Andrews? So move, Councillor. Amendment moved by Councillor Turland, seconded Councillor Andrews. You have the right to speak to the motion initially, and so just change your lights, please.
Look, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Mr Pepping is right, and basically he said it would be such a shame to see the heritage of this significant property be destroyed, to cut it up. And that's why, and it's a very good report that council staff have done on this. Look, gentlemen, I wish you'd gone in today and had a look at the garden and walked through the place. I know we were busy doing other things. You're occupied, I know. But please, councillors, this is not the way to go. Look, this has already been substantially subdivided. You know, it's a value. It's a heritage valued garden and house in situ, you know, that's been in place, similar to what we had at Milton Park with its garden. What do? Do you cut off the garden and leave the house? Do you leave the house and cut off the garden? I mean, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. What Mr Pepping has spoken about today and from our staff, and the recommendation that's come forward from staff, that this is a substantial heritage item that needs to be preserved in situ, with its garden, with its gates, with all that. Now what are you going to do? You're going to chop out the gates, you're going to lose the gates, you're going to lose all the trees. Okay, there might be a couple of dead trees. But apart from that, Mr Mayor, this is intact at the moment. Just like the Glebe Heritage Estate is still intact. And I hope it stays that way. So what I'm saying today, Mr Mayor, is that this report states quite clearly why it ticks all those boxes with regard to why it should be listed as a heritage item. And we're only talking about an interim heritage item at this stage, if I read Mr Pepping correctly. If we don't pass this today, then the interim heritage order falls over. So I think, you know, councillors, think about this very carefully, because, you know, they can always come back. You know, a heritage order doesn't mean it still stays as R2, is my understanding. But to leave it and cut it up now, I think would deprive it of the interim heritage status that it really deserves. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Councillor Turland was going to speak against.
Well, no, yeah, I will give...
I'm speaking for. Anyway, I'll go ahead. Look, the recommendation put forward by the staff is a no-brainer, Mr Mayor, and I fully support the recommendation, the motion put forward. It appears that some form of compromise has prevailed in the past, because there's been approval for 33 odd lots around the development. So the developers have made substantial money, but I think it must stop there. I agree with Councillor McLaughlin. And the owners probably must agree, as they've withdrawn their previous DA. They put in a DA and then they've withdrawn it, so they must agree with that as well. But it would have a significant change if this development would go ahead. I actually called up the previous DA, Mr Mayor, and came into council yesterday and made a few notes. And actually Councillor Turlin here has got what, 12 lots all set up. Now, he's prepared to cut up 4 lots, but oh gee, it still cuts it up. But it's to remove 66 trees out of the development to fit in 12 lots. And the road changes, the driveways change, it doesn't comply, the services, the building area, all to put in 10 new dwellings. And does not respect heritage significance. This is what the staff are saying in the report. Overdevelopment of the site. And then it says here, the landscape tree retention plan. That's code for actual tree removal plan, Mr Mayor. And the staff go on to say, demonstrates the catastrophic effect that this subdivision design will have on the established landscape. But hang on, they will plant 7 bottle trees as replacement, taking out 66 trees. There's problems with the stormwater, traffic, the water sewer modelling, the water sewer concept plan, they all don't comply. However, the flora and fauna assessment that they provided in the report says that the Southern Highland Shale woodland does not meet the relevant condition and will not have a significant impact. There's no threat on the flora, no koala habitat, no significant impact on the flying fox there. So the impact assessment says most of the trees are dead or dying and could be removed. So, you know, let's go. I did think about, when I looked at it, that there might be some compromise to put in some lots there. I was sort of thinking like Councillor Turlin, that maybe some lots could go in there. But when we did the on-site inspection today, we walked around the gardens. I can't see how you could put any lots in there. So I sort of can see where the owners are coming from, but I think they could come back to council in 15 years and have another think about it.
Councillor Turlin.
Well, they can't come back in 15 years because once, if this goes through, which you're putting forward, it's all done and dusted because there's a planning proposal to stop it. At the moment, the land is capable of taking a subdivision. And the subdivision that was applied by the applicants and removed as a request of council staff to remove it. And they did that in good faith, thinking that they weren't going to get their throat cut further down the line. Councillors need to look upon themselves as if they owned the property, or a friend or a cousin or whatever else. Would they like to see it lost? It's zoned for it, it's allowed to happen, but now we're going to change our mind now. The zoning should not have been allowed from day one if that's where you wanted to go, and here we are after the event trying to change it. If you have a look at the particular plan here, and we've all got it on our books, 148, you can see all the new houses right round the old house. You have the same curtilage. If you look at what I was trying to play with the 12-lot subdivision, with only 4 lots, not 12, 4, you'll have the same setbacks that's already been approved in the previous subdivision. I think it's a compromise, because at this point of time, regardless of what you do tonight, it is still allowed and zoned for 700 square metre lots. That's the zoning. Can't stop that until the planning proposal goes through. So I think
the chair, please.
What's needed to be is more compromise through the process here, because I've downloaded a photo here of Warrawong, which is right next to the Mossvale High School. And we approved over there, as you remember, Councillor McLaughlin, Warrawong. We gathered the house around. I've got it on the iPad, Google Earth. and we kept the house entitlement and the trees, and we changed the entrance, but we allowed the subdivision around. No different than this. This is not new. You're keeping the entirety of the good house. The trees, well, I think they're in question. They should, well, you know how much I like trees. Anyway, at the end of the day, my compromise is 4 lots. I think you're going to have a lot of trouble if you just do 1 hectare, so there's only 1 lot on the property. I don't think you're going to get that through the system. You might get it through the system, but there'll be a court case eventually at the other end because they own the property, it's zoned for it, they can do it now. And your interim heritage order is in both motions. None of that stops. It keeps the house protected. Gives you time.
Thank you, Councillor Turl and Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm supporting the recommendation. I think it's the only way to go. I'm looking at the same map that Councillor Turlin's looking at, and I think that the property we're talking about is becoming more and more of an oasis in suburbia. I think it's really up to us to maintain some of the integrity of that potential heritage dwelling. I'd like to see the interim heritage order become a permanent heritage order, and hopefully that will happen. On page 155, councillors, our states here that it should be reiterated, though, that council officers and council heritage advisor consider the actual subdivision potential of the site is low to nil. And I think that's quite right. Anybody that would have been on site this morning, I think would have had to appreciate the integrity of that site. If we start eating into it, it loses, its charm. And I think once that happens, we've got a little pocket of suburbia without that sort of reminder of what this part of Bundanoon used to be like. So I think we need to look at everything on merit, councillors, and based on merit, I think it's worthy of at least an interim heritage order in the first instance, and hopefully a more permanent solution in the longer term.
Thank you. Any further debate? Do you want to write a reply, Councillor McLaughlin?
Yeah, look, just quickly, and I hope I've got the numbers on this, Mr Mayor. I think I have, and just holding this up for you to see, you can see that, look, we have got some big blocks on the other side, and that it does fit in with the landscape. And you've got to remember, Mr Mayor, all this was part of this, and all this big subdivision, as Councillor Nelson said, they've already benefited from a massive subdivision on this block. To attack the integrity of what is left now, I just find, it would just be such a shame to see that chopped up. There might be a couple of dead trees, but when you look at that over the overview, there's a lot of live trees in there. I mean, it's as you said. I mean, Councillor Whipper, it is a bit of an oasis there in a new subdivision. I think it's done quite nicely, and I'm not opposed to growth, but I'm all for keeping a bit of our. We can't heritage list everything, Mr Mayor. We can't save everything. I do understand that. But I think when our staff tell us that this is exceptional and it's of value and we need to keep it, let's keep it. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. That put the... no, you don't have...
No, you got the right of reply.
He had the right of reply. So I put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment, moved by Councillor Turlin and seconded by Councillor Andrews. Put it. All in favour, Councillors Turlin and Andrews. Those against? Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin and Gare. I declare the amendment lost. I now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin and Gare. We now move to, I declare it carried. And against. And against, and against, and against. Councillors Turland and Andrews. Move to page 162, 12.6, adoption of swimming pool barrier policy. Now, that is that we adopt the report that has been out on exhibition, and that the swimming pool policy barrier guidelines take effect from 7 days following this adoption by council. So that is recommendation moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Halstead. Anybody wish to speak to it? Councillor Scandrett.
Well, it falls to me, I think, Mr Mayor. I mean, yes, we've got to move ahead with this, but I can't ignore the fact being, and I think I'm the only councillor living on rural acreage, that, you know, you could end up with a... on a hill.
Thank you.
You have a pond, yes.
Lots of ponds.
And we do end up with a situation where you can have a fenced swimming pool right next to a dam, watercourse, or whatever. So there's sort of the common sense that still should be there, Mr Mayor, responsibilities for landowners out there. I mean, toddlers can drown in a matter of less than 300 mil of water if the situation is bad. So I guess when we go forth with this, we've got to have a bit of an even-handed approach, because I wouldn't want to see a enforcement on a pool that is adjoining a pond, if you take my point. Anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Thank you. Now, Councillor McLaughlin, would you put in as point 3 that a press release be prepared in relation to the above motion? So can that be added, please? It has been. Well done. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just, and I note that there were some concerns raised in this, following on from Councillor Scandrett as well. There's a lot of dams out there and ponds, which may or may not be on rural properties. Some residential properties have small ponds, certainly more than 300 millimetres deep, and small children can equally drown, whether it's a pond or a swimming pool, an inflatable pool or whatever, in 300 millimetres of water. I was just going to ask, if I could, a clarification as to why ponds and dams don't fall into the same guideline, based on safety issues, Mr Mayor.
Yes, well, we're sort of in debate, but it hasn't. I think we can ask that question for clarification through you, Acting General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, that's something that would need to be referred through to the state government. In relation to the Swimming Pools Act, it is very clear in terms of the definition of a swimming pool. It relates, it's basically capable of being filled up to a depth of not greater than 300 mil. It's solely or principally used, or designed, manufactured or adopted to be solely or principally used for the purpose of a swimming pool, wading or any other human aquatic activity. And whilst staff accept that ponds can be used for that purpose, and the same with dams, unfortunately the limitations in the Swimming Pool Act only enable us to refer to it on that basis.
Thank you. Comes back to Councillor Scandrett. The common sense prevails. No further comment. Then I put the recommendation as moved by Councillors McLaughlin and Halstead. All in favour. Those against, carried. We move to 12.7, Draft Garden World Voluntary Planning Agreement, and the recommendation is that the Draft Garden World Voluntary Planning Agreement not proceed, and that the proponent and submission makers to the exhibition of the Draft Voluntary Planning Agreement be notified of Council's decision. Moved Councillor Scandrett, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Anybody need a... It's in relation to a DA has been put in for a subdivision of that block, which now supersedes the voluntary planning agreement, basically. Put that, all in favour, those against, carried. We move to page 12.8, appointment of community representatives to the Heritage Advisory Committee.
I'd like to move this, Mr Mayor.
And basically it says that the council accept the nominations of both Mr Dennis McManus and Mr Simon Bathgate to the Heritage...
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, seconded Councillor Nelson, McLaughlin, seconded Nelson. Any discussion on those appointments?
Just
Councillor
quickly,
McLaughlin.
Look, we've got a very good Heritage Committee following on. Mr. Dennis McManus was a state heritage planner in his working life, so we're very lucky to have him on board. He used to hold up the Wingecarribee as the shining light in New South Wales. When he used to travel around, we were the ones that he would tell other councillors about, that this was the council that really did great work in heritage. I've got to commend our Deputy General Manager Mark Pepping recently with an email that he sent to all councillors with regard to where we're going with heritage and how important it is that we don't let all this slide. A lot of work has been done, and he has flagged that there will be an information session. Sorry, I'm talking to this, Mr. Bear, but just generally in heritage, we have got an eclectic group, all specialists, all professionals in their own right, whether they be architects, work in landscape planning or what have you. So we have a very good working group now, and now that we're up and running, I think we can add a lot of value to council staff time, and where we get the opportunity now, we can move forward. So I thank you for your time, and the previous Mayor, Councillor Halstead, when I met with him, with Dennis McManus, who's coming back on, and he actually does presentations on the stuff that we've got in our shire right around the place. He gets asked to speak about it, and he's passionate about heritage, and that's all the people that are on this committee. They're very passionate about it, and you know, I was looked like we were going to lose them all, but they're all back on track, and I again thank Mr. Pepping for his support and council's support. And can I just say in passing, that last report done by our staff member, I won't mention her name, but our heritage planner, who's only here part-time, I think did an excellent job in that last report with regard to that heritage item. So I welcome these people on board. We have got an extra person on board representing the community, because when we went out for expressions of interest, Mr. Mayor, we were overwhelmed with about 7 or 8 really good applications, and sometimes we're a person short for a quorum. So I thought it was worthwhile that we brought someone else on. Thanks. I'll wind up now.
Just getting wound up.
30 seconds.
I stand to support the chairman of the Heritage Committee and say that all the applicants were of a very high standard, so it was difficult for the committee to come to a decision, but the committee were very interested in that possibly some of the other candidates could be invited to a committee meeting on a rotational basis, just so they could see how the committee works, and because they showed so much interest. But yes, and I refer to your last comment about the staff member who wrote a very detailed letter refuting the letter that we got from the solicitor that was supporting that development.
Thank you. A bit of an inside conversation here. Councillor Scandal.
Mr. Mayor. Yes, look, I'll be supporting this. I've raised the suggestion that, particularly in view, as you say here, councillors, that you had a really good response from applicants with very high qualifications, that we should have a couple of reserves in case there's ever a vacancy there. I'm not suggesting they're participants. I'm just suggesting that they are reserves, and I'll leave that thought there. You might like to add it in, Councillor McLaughlin, because you don't want to go through this process again where you're short of people. So that's the first thing. And I also wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, this committee is important, and this committee has to have teeth. And when it puts a recommendation to this council, that recommendation must go right through the system and be considered by here, not taken out in the minutes in the debate or anything like that. It must be considered by this council.
Thank you, Councillor Scandal. Any further debate? Clarification.
Clarification is the reports from this committee don't come to this council for in relation to developments. That's a different issue. They have a report, they have minutes, they go through the issues, but that's as far as it goes. They don't come to council in relation to development and saying we have to approve it because they've in the minutes. That's not how it works.
No.
We're an advisory.
I know, but it's just not what we said.
Okay, no, we're not going to clarify. The clarification is that it is an advisory committee to council in relation to development application. If council wishes to take note of their recommendations, then that is different.
But they can't.
But it not necessarily must take.
Mr Mayor, by qualification, I was saying that you can't change the minutes of the committee when they're in the business paper. That's what I was saying. They must stay there.
No, that's dead right. You just don't have to adopt. You don't have to adopt them nor support them. Right. So we've sorted that one out.
Yes.
Councillor, put the motion as moved by Councillor McLaughlin Nelson. All in favour, against, carried. 12.9, motions for local government to the annual conference. This is in relation to the government being requested to take an urgent holistic review of the development contribution system in New South Wales and trying to reduce the financial burden placed on councils in relation to infrastructure and support population growth. So that's the thrust of the motion. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to it, or would you like staff? Because I know Mr Pepping is a little bit passionate on this one. Do you want to make any comment, Mr Pepping, seeing it's your motion but you're not a councillor?
Through the Acting General Manager. Look, yes, you're right, Mr Mayor. This is a matter that has been haunting planning for many years, and the Department of Planning did attempt to try and do a review of the developed contribution system some time ago and have failed to succeed in that process. So it is due for an overhaul. There is situations where councils are burdened with trying to match the developer contributions in the order of 80% in some instances, as we are, and that places a responsibility on council to first of all find the money and to deliver that infrastructure in a timely process. So if we can put something before the conference and they can write to the state government, hopefully something might happen in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Do you wish to sum up now? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Those against? I won't ask you the votes against. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, support this going up, but I do want to say that I question the efficacy now of some of the work that the Local Government Association has been trying to do. I haven't seen the outcomes. I've been to a bunch of these conferences over my 2 terms, and quite frankly, I just wonder sometimes if it's just a bit of a talk fest. So I'll watch with interest on this one, Mr Mayor, because we're not getting through. And that's where obviously our JO work with the regional organisation and other bodies might be more effective. We'll just see.
Thank you, and that's another issue and another conversation we've got to have. But we have 3 notices of motion now, or 3 motions going to the LGA this year, so we'll see how we go. Put the, well, I thought it was moved by... Oh no, you've been moving all night. Councillors Whipper and Andrews. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. 12.10, page 186, draft agency information guide, and the recommendation is that the information guide, including attachment 1, be adopted by council. Move Councillor Nelson and secondly Councillor Turland. Is there any discussion? Then I put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. 16.1, page 206, Management and Advisory Committee reports. Move Councillors Nelson, seconded Councillor Scandrett. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. Moving to 18.1, notice of rescission of motion. What are we on? 15. 207. Oh, one over the page. Minutes of the Traffic Committee. recommendation they be adopted. Moved by Councillors Halstead, seconded Councillor Whipper. Any discussion? Put it. Is there any, sorry, the minutes are attached. Is there any item within the minutes of the Traffic Committee you wish to put out and have a look? Okay. All right, well, that's simple. Then we put it all in favour. Those against, carried. Now we move on to notice of rescission motion, 10 Franklin Street, Barrel. Moved by Councillors Turl and Whipper and Halstead. 18.1, page 212. Councillor Turl.
Yeah, look, this is just to make sure that we have the best opportunity of council's properties to make sure that the community will gain the best benefit. To putting it at least to open tender is one of the options, and if you look at the motion, if this is successful, to have the rescission motion of the, which is written on the paper there, is that we hold a briefing session with interested external property consultants to provide options and opportunities for the best benefit of the community, the Wingecarribee Shire residents, and it could include sale, leasing, PPP, which is private partner, public partnership, or any other venture, joint venture, that could be considered. So this is what I've put forward to hopefully allow, not to stop the sale, but to open it up to all issues for the best benefit of the community. This bit of land owes us $1 because it's the old sewer plant. And it has an opportunity there a lot bigger than what I think we all expect. But to sell it to the lowest tender and not get the best benefit for the wider community. I've mentioned before, Harbison Homes is in Mossvale and in Barrel. There's no non-for-profit retirement village in Mittagong. There's an opportunity for that to happen. So that's just one option. Could be other providers out there for non-for-profit that we could use this to help our ageing population, but the people that need to go in that facility. That's just one option. But we need to open it up to all options, not just one.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. Councillor McLaughlin.
Gee, I'm glad I'm on the right side with Councillor Turland here tonight with this. He's taken the developer hat off and not subdividing. No, look, I thank you, Councillor Nelson, for bringing this up. Councillor Turland, for bringing this forward because, look, I think it's close to a lot of our hearts. We're not against selling it, as you said, but let's look at the best options that we've got in this. I mean, you know, the state government sells a lot of land to do developments, and how they go about that is they get specialists in that know how to deal with these things. And I know we've got good staff here that deal with all sorts of things, but this is not their expertise. This is really not what they do, to go out and...
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. But look, I'd just like to just quickly say that this is where I think we really need to go. Look at the options that there could be. All those things are said there, and I think a rescission motion, we're not against selling it, but we need to be aware as councillors ourselves what the potential of this is. You know, we're just throwing it up in the air. We don't know really what the potential could be. Now, I think we know the zoning of it and the height we could go to on this land. You know, can it accommodate 1,000 units for people with special needs or seniors? I don't know. But they're the sort of things we might be able to find out. Can we lease some of it? Can we sell some of it? All those things. So I'm very pleased to be able to support this because I think the community needs to know that this was community land, and just selling it to swap it off for somewhere in Barrel or something else. Let's have a real good hard look at what we can do now with this land, Mr Mayor, because the opportunity is here now. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
No, Mr Mayor, I can't support this rescission motion. Let's stick with the motion that we have before us and let's see what the tender will provide. You still don't have to make a decision, or you can still go down the path of looking at it. But Mr Mayor, the last joint venture we went into with the state government, we ended up with a library that was too small when it opened. So, you know, I'm a bit sceptical about joint ventures. Anyway, I'm happy to stick with the current resolution, the staff, by holding a briefing session and seeing where we go. It won't happen in this term, it'll be next term.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, for 2 terms I've advocated the sale of this property through an auction process for transparency, and it's been controversial to say the least. And in fact, at the beginning of this term, Councillors Turland, Andrews and McLaughlin had to apologise in this chamber for having been involved in discussions regarding that. It's a fact.
I'm sorry, that is not the case.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have my name removed from that. I'll have an apology because that is not true.
I believe that to be correct in the Councillor McLaughlin.
Can I get some?
Well, I believe...
Councillor Scandrett,
You're asking
can
me
I
to
please
speak?
ask... I did ask you to speak, but
Right, well, I'll
still
respond to
confine
that.
yourself to the boundaries of the
All
debate
right.
and do not
Well,
name
my
councillors
recollection, with respect, Councillor, is that
Scandrett,
3 councillors
debate.
stood up in this chamber, 2 of whom were councillors last term, at the beginning of this term, to say that they had been in discussions with not-for-profit groups and others. Okay, if I'm wrong, let the record show it. Okay. No, well, the truth's the truth.
Councillor
I mean, the truth is the truth.
Can you please
Anyway.
stick to the rescission motion, which is in relation to the recommendation
I will,
that's
Mr
been
Mayor,
put?
and look, I hope I'm talking in words similar to you, what you might say eventually on this tonight. But this property has been a circus. It's been going round and round, and we've missed the mark. I mean, in terms of big commercial developments there, when it probably had maximum value some years ago, and we could have realised that and spent that, for example, paying off the pool out here. There's quite a demand for income into this council with the amount of projects ahead of us, and this land is sitting barren. We're not developers. We don't have expertise in running nursing homes. We don't want to be landlords. Well, that's not what I see in 2031. There's no aspiration in there, with supported by the community, for us to be in that. You can talk about Kiama councillors and say, yes, we should be running retirement homes or mobile homes, parks or whatever, but that's not in the 2031 vision for this council. It's not there at all. And in fact, what's in that vision is to get on with things that we should do. Bike and cycling and walking plans, which are, I say, in the bottom drawer often, need funding. There's a funding source. So were this to be sold, we can have a very good chat about that. But it was only last term that councillors, including Councillor Turland, myself and others, were saying, let's pay down the pool with this, pay down the Moss Vale Aquatic Centre with the proceeds of these sales, and extract ourselves from those loans at the rollover time. If people want to buy this, if not-for-profits or retirement operators or nursing home operators or developers participate in the process that's on the table right now, and I haven't asked Mr Paul for an update on where that's at, but he'd be well underway with that, well underway with getting those tenders ready. That's what we should be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I support the rescission motion. I think, yes, it's been around a long time. We've spoken about it a lot. But one of the things I don't think we've spoken about in earnest is council's social responsibility. And I think in this day and age, when people are doing it tough, and when we know that homelessness is on the increase, mental illness is on the rise, the pressures, the costs of living that are being imposed on us by state and federal government, and other factors, that just make survival difficult for people. I think we need to reevaluate where we're standing, and if we've got an opportunity to consider some social options that may be of benefit to the wider community, including young people and elderly people in our community, then I think the very least we can do is explore those options. It may be that it's not viable, but we'll never know if we never give it the opportunity or the sincerity. I believe that we're sort of empowered by the people of this community to do. And there may be innovative ways, and there may be partnerships that can be formed that do have social and financial outcomes that benefit the community, the wider community, rather than individuals or individual developments. So, councillors, I'd urge you just to take a breath in this instance. If it takes a little bit longer, so what? I don't think it's a threat to anybody, but what it shows is that we do have some compassion, and we can show that to the community, and at least put that into the equation. I do believe we have that responsibility.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, the last time I voted on this would have been very clearly for an open tender process, and that would have been as a result of listening to what was going on and what had gone on before in terms of individuals, quite rightfully, being able to just approach the council and say, well, I'd like to buy your property, which I didn't see as right. However, legal it may have been. In terms of this one, again, one of the end results may well be with my vote is that I'm still favouring the open tender process. But, you know, if you look at what's written here, there's nothing offensive about this, quite frank. And I do agree that, and I'm particularly that way, although I may not be inclined the way these two are, or say it as often, but there is a social responsibility in a whole lot of what we do, and I don't think we do enough for the Aboriginal community. We don't do enough for the people that have really got a genuine problem in terms of social needs, or the disability and the aged. All those, in my view, rank high. But, you know, one of the outcomes here may well be that we still come back to an open tender or a public auction, which sometimes I think is better than the open tender, to be frank. I mean, you'll know what it's really worth, providing it's, if you like, investigated properly. But what this shouldn't do, you know, other than a couple of people in the staff here being able to think, oh, Halstead's wishy-washy again, which I really am, but that's bad luck, because I could see some merit in this. When Councillor Turlin approached me on this, I thought he's got it right, because there are some other issues that need to be dealt with. Now, wishy-washy I'm not, because if I had to make a decision at any time, it'll be black and white. There'll be no grey areas. It'll be bang, bang, one of the others. It may not be the way that some people think it's going to be, but there's great value in doing this. Has it, or is it going to hold it up anymore? Yep, a small amount. It's gone on for years now. It was going on well before this council was elected back in 2016 September. So, you know, what's the manic rush? I don't think there's any. But following this, I think we probably will get the right outcome. Now, am I bent towards a public-private partnership? Not necessarily. Am I bent towards some not-for-profit organisation coming forth and, you know, going on with that? It would have to be a damn good case and have to be argued very thoroughly, and this may well get someone that knows what they're doing to advise, because I think Barry Paul up, he'd be the first to suggest that he sticks his neck on a whole lot of issues and does his best for the community, but he's not an expert in this area. I'm sure he'd agree with that, as the same as I'm not an expert outside my area of expertise. Simply, this is not a motion where anybody should be worried about it. Hopefully the end result that'll come out of this is a better one than we've currently got.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Initially, this probably or possibly should be a point of order. Councillor Scandrett, yeah, I was one of two councillors that met with three not-for-profit organisations in early 2016, and to this moment I'm proud that we had that discussion. They were very informal, and I might add and make it quite clear, Councillor Scandrett, that Councillor McLaughlin wasn't one of those two. In regard to the rescission...
Councillor McLaughlin.
In regard to the rescission motion, I won't be supporting it. I keep hearing and respectfully hearing that we're not against selling it. Well, we determined on the 26th of June via open tender that we would sell Franklin Street or make an effort to sell Franklin Street, and I haven't changed my mind since.
Thank you. And before you have your right of reply, Councillor Turland, I have been advocating for the sale of this for the longest, Councillor, I think I can say. And that goes back to around about 2006, 2000 and whatever, because to me the funds should have been used to fund the aquatic centre or the leisure centre that was proposed as an alternate borrowing of all the monies. But anyway, that didn't happen. We have a motion on the books that said it goes to open tender. And the motion also says council does not have to accept that tender. So here we are again trying to, in my opinion, put the scuttlebutt into this, and let's see whether we can defer it again. And then when this is going to take 4 or 5 months, and then we can't meet a decision, and we're running into the next council and we can't do it because there's a council election coming up. You know, I've seen it all before, and I'm not the one to stop the process once it's commenced in the right manner. And we had a very fair, open and robust debate in relation to this. And to me, this is just another method to attempt to stop the sale, and we will have that chance again when the open tender process finishes, and I have great faith the council staff will use every professional body out there to realise the best return for the community. Councillor Turl.
Well, the forum for non-for-profits that we went to see was the RSL for Widows of Vets. My mother was in a RSL war home vet in Gosford. Non-for-profit. Challenge Southern Highlands, kids with disability, adult children. How could you not deny them another chance to grow? You know, it took them 10 years under this previous council to try and get them one block of land to build a new home for them. 10 years, probably longer. Argyle Housing, another non-for-profit to try and meet the needs of people in our shire, and obviously Harbison Homes. They're all very excited to try and work as a group together to try and work forward for something of a bit of land that owes us nothing, absolutely nothing. It's B5. It's the only building or zoning in this district you can build to 17 metres high. There is nowhere else. The township, B2, is only 14. The opportunities here are enormous. Now, council's gone down the path of subdividing it in 2 lots. The whole issue here, it could be 1 lot we keep for the community benefit, not both, and sell 1 lot off. And if you read the motion, if it got up, it allows the opportunity for us to be educated by the proper companies
Through
out there
the chair,
that do this
Councillor
every
Turner,
day.
please.
You do this every day. Because around this table, I look at the people who actually have got property. It's Councillor Scandrett and myself. We are both developers. You're a landowner. We're developers. So the opportunity is yes, you are. We understand the issue. We understand the issues about the potential of this bit of land, and it's a shame if we don't educate ourselves for the whole gambit, let alone the public. Because you guys are going to make a decision, you don't own it, the public does. Are you going to be happy to take the backlash against you if you go down this path and sell it too cheap and somebody else makes millions out of it? That's not what I want. I want the public to make the benefit without having the information that we could be provided to us by the non-for-profits and profits, but non-for-profits, hopefully, this is where I want to go. We are blind. Blind. We're not seeing the real benefit of this site. We're seeing, let's flog it, pay down a bit of debt, or put it into Station Street. Station Street has been going for 40 years and now we need a bit of money to fix it up to buy a car park. I would find that offensive that we would sell such a beautiful bit of land in Mittagong that could be used for the public benefit to put it into a car park in Barrel. You sure the people in Mittagong are going to be happy with that? I'm not. So you might think this is over, Councillor Gare or Mayor, but it's not.
I didn't.
Because you know I don't let things go.
Councillor Turland.
No, you just mentioned before.
Me.
No. You've been.
I haven't said a word.
You did it. You had your discussion beforehand. Now this is my right of reply. It is not over.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. I put the all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin and Turland. Those against? Councillors Scandrett, Nelson and Andrews and Gare. As it's a tied vote and as there is a motion on the books for the sale, I use the casting vote to deny the rescission motion. Okay, we now move on to 18 point... Oh, now I put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hands.
No, it's defeated, isn't it?
No, it's been defeated. I've put that I use the casting vote to make the motion. 18.2, notice of rescission motion, Illawarra Academy of Sport. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yep, good, thanks. Look, when this matter's voted on tonight, I'll be hopefully seeking to get 8 votes, since there's one councillor away, in favour of the rescission motion. Now, I might have twisted Councillor Turlin's arm, so we'll see how I go tonight.
Who's seconded, McLaughlin or Andrews?
Andrews.
Councillor Andrews is the seconder.
Anyway,
sorry, carry on.
I can't understand why Councillor Turlin voted against the $2,000, because he was previously the chair or council's representative of the IAS. But I do understand that he voted against the $2,000 for the kids because they got access to the indoor leisure centre, and that cost $3,000. But, you know, so what? If they get $3,000 there, why can't we give them, give the kids of the IAS of this shire the $2,000 for them here? But just a couple of facts, Mr Mayor. The IAS fee hasn't been increased for 5 years. So surely $2,000 increase won't break the bank here. And of course, we're 123,000 in front already, since the state government's going to pay the emergency levy. The other thing is that council actually resolved to increase the IAS fees by the CPI each year. So in fact, council's in front because the IAS have never come back in those 5 years and asked for the increase of the fee. They've done it a bit late because our budget was done, but they've come back and said with their overall budget they need $2,000 from each of the councils that are in the IAS. Councillor Andrews and I attended the mayoral reception just a while ago for the Shire's 16 elite IAS sportsmen and women. And the chairman of the IAS was there, and he mentioned that a few years ago there was a skinny kid riding his bike around Mossvale before he went into the IAS system. And that skinny kid just won 3 stages of the Tour de France. Just missing the green jacket, Mr Mayor, and they call him the Mossvale Missile, Caleb Ewan. And of course the paper's done, you know, a full-page story on this young kid that used to be riding his bike around Mossvale that's gone on to win 3 stages of the Tour de France. You know, what a great achievement and how fantastic it is for this shire. So, and just imagine, Mr Mayor, if that young lady back in the day running around the shire mile after mile, just imagine if she was in the IAS system. Instead of winning the Commonwealth gold that we all celebrated, she might have won Olympic gold. And of course, she went on to win the keys of the Shire, and we did a huge celebration for her. And of course, her name was Heather Turlin. Anyway, so councillors, look, I'm asking you to give $2,000 out of the budget for our elite sports kids in the Shire.
Thank you.
Please vote for the rescission motion.
All right, it's pretty basic. I'll just do a clarification so people are aware. There is a mayoral reception on an annual basis in Wingecarribee here for those who represent the Shire in the IAS. And before I put the motion, you'll be foreshadowing that subject to this, you'll be moving the motion at the bottom, just so everybody's aware that there'll be another motion coming forward for $2,000 a year out of the contingency vote. Is that what that's the vote? So I put the rescission motion as moved by councillors Nelson and Andrews. All in favour? There you go. We get there. That's how you get spruik. Carried unanimously. Councillor Whip, noting the Councillor Whipper is absent. So now
I'm
I
happy to
declare
move
carried.
the motion that council support the request of the Illawarra Academy of Sport and increase its annual funding support provided by council an additional $2,000 in the 1920 financial year, and that $2,000 be allocated from the contingency vote.
Move, second. Oh, I think Councillor Andrews should have the privilege of seconding it. Councillor Scandra, can we keep the debates fairly short, please?
Sure, Mr Mayor. If you look at the motion that Councillor Tolan and myself moved previously, part 2 was to include the IAS request for review of current funding support in the next budget, which is 2021. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't, Councillor Nelson, shouldn't put part 2 back into your motion arising.
Oh, not necessary. No, not necessary. Councillor Tolan.
Just to clarify one thing is, my dear wife didn't start running for Australia until she was 31. These kids finish at 18. Big difference, double the age.
Thank you, and I put the recommendation as moved. All in favour? Aye. Carried. We now move on to page 214, 18.3. Notice of motion, Station Street upgrade. Now this has been put forward by Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, I'm just going to briefly speak, looking for a seconder, because there's a lot of people in the community.
Now do we have a seconder?
Oh, thank you, Councillor.
Who did?
Councillor Halstead.
I said he might have just lost his seconder.
Well, who seconded it?
Nobody seconded it at the moment.
Do we have a seconder?
Well,
Then we don't have a seconder. It lapses through the want of a seconder.
well,
It lapses through the want of a seconder. We move to 18.4.
I think the meeting rules, Mr Mayor.
Page
Point of order,
2.1.
Mr Mayor. Point of order, Mr Mayor. I think the meeting rules do allow me to speak briefly.
No, they don't.
Looking for a
No,
second.
they do not.
All right, I'll
No,
watch
they do
the rest
not.
of these motions.
18.4, notice of motion, clean up and rubbish removal of Station Street Barrel. So, can I, before this comes, can I just have a comment from staff in relation to this? Councillor, because we can have in relation to this, will this have any impact on the funding arrangement in relation to Infrastructure New South Wales? Will they see this as a commencement of the project? I want to get this clarified.
Well, before Mr Paul says anything, the reason this was deferred from the last meeting was that nobody seemed to fully know what it was actually about.
Well,
that there was confusion as to what, that was my understanding of why it was deferred. Might be wrong, but they didn't seem to understand what Barrel Street to Northern Car Park and... Well, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, no, not from you, from staff, does this have any impact and can it be deemed in relation to as a commencement?
Again, what was the real intent of the wording?
Okay, then.
Let me speak first and then we can ask.
Then I'll give it to you, Councillor Turlin, and it'll be at this stage seconded by Councillor Halstead. That'll do.
Okay. It's as simple as from the Barrel Street roundabout on Station Street, there's all the rubbish of trees, self-seated elms, not the major trees that are out in the footpath, but all the rubbish behind it. And you wouldn't even know there's a 6-foot drain, 1.8 metres, as tall as me, in behind that.
Okay, so what area are we talking?
Basically from the
roundabout,
Barrel Street roundabout
look,
Station Street,
I have no problem
only
with
to
it.
where where all the rubbish stops. All
Okay.
the car park starts.
Now, can you resume your seat, please? Because this concerns me that we have been told by Infrastructure New South Wales that if there is a so-called attempt to commence the project prior to issues being sorted out, then we have the chance of losing funding. So can I ask comment from councillor staff, please?
Look, through you, Mr Mayor, the advice I would offer is this. If we are going there to do maintenance works in what is an open drain, we're doing maintenance works in an open drain. There is a stormwater pipe that I guess provides drainage to Station Street that exits in that car park near the Nissan Hut there into an open drain, and it runs along...
Oh, I'm not talking that far up.
Right, okay.
Where the old weight bridge is.
Yep, okay. Well, there is effectively an open stormwater drain that runs along there.
True.
The only comment I might offer is that the self-seeded trees and overgrowth, undergrowth that's there, it does actually provide some protection for people not to fall into that open drain. But at the end of the day, if it's purely maintenance works, then it's maintenance works. It's not associated with the construction of Station Street, would be my view.
Okay.
And
Councillor, unless you... Look, I'm going to allow a question on this one because it does, to me, it is, as long as it's a question.
Yes, it's a point of clarification. Is, and I hope I've got this right, Lot 2, DP 814859, which was owned by the ARTC. I've asked this question last meeting, Madam GM. Part of this proposal, it's land we're trying to acquire from the ARTC.
It's up the other end.
No, this...
Give me a moment, please. Mr Paul, we have acquired what land we need from the ARTC.
We've reached agreement, we've exchanged contracts, we've paid a deposit, and my understanding is, well, actually we've paid more than a deposit. We've paid a deposit and we've paid the purchase price into a trust fund, and we were awaiting finalisation of that contract. I'm not sure where that's up to. I'll have to take that on notice. But effectively, we've bought the property.
So we have access to this land? Is that been confirmed?
Yes.
Well, the drain we're talking about isn't on that land. It's on council land.
It's around this drain. I'm asking about this bit.
Well, I believe the drain we're talking about is on council land.
Okay. No, right. Then, Councillor Turland, you have the right.
Okay. Look, the issue is we need to clean it up regardless of the issue of maybe people might not fall in it because there's some rubbish in front of it. That's not a good reason not to clean it. If council has to put up a cheap wire fence or builder's fence because the drain is as deep as this, so be it. But at the moment, anybody can fall in it coming home from the pub now, and you wouldn't even find them for 6 months because you can't see them. It's all the rubbish that's there. So this issue is to clean up basically from Barrel Street, all that overgrown ivy and push bikes and bloody milk crates, you name it's in there. I've been walking through there a few times to have a look. But at the same time, it's cleaning out our drains to make our drainage system work better, and I think it's an opportunity we should start on now. It has no effect under the funding because we aren't getting any money off the state government in relation to it. We raised our own cash.
No, that's...
No, the Illawarra sale of the coal loader doesn't have anything to do with Infrastructure New South Wales in relation to them giving us money. That was the coal loader sale. And the other $2 million for the 9.5 million. Anyway, we're going for different directions.
Yeah, I think
this
you're
is
splitting
just
hairs
drains
on
only
the money.
and trees. You know, we don't want to blow out the figures about Station Street because it always gets blown out of water.
So we have the recommendation. There it is. I'll put the recommendation as moved by councillors Turland and Halstead. All in favour? Those against? Councillor Scandrett is against. Councillor Scandrett wishes for his name to be recorded. 18.5, notice of motion, civic prayer, 217. Councillor Whipper.
I'm hoping there's some clarity on this one tonight.
You get a second.
if I have a-
Before you start, yes, Councillor Turlin.
Thank you. All right, councillors, this is something that I have brought back because there was no resolution at the last meeting. It was just status quo. So I think we need to determine our position on this one way or the other, and hopefully it can be a bit more clearly debated tonight. But I brought a motion similar to this to council way back in 2003. The council of the day thought it best not to proceed that way. The motion I have before you, councillors, is a motion that's based on inclusiveness, nothing more. It's in no way aimed to denigrate our Christian foundations in this country, nor is it anything other than allowing the opportunity to other religions to actually open the meeting in prayer. Certainly the Australian landscape has changed considerably. We have many people from many different nations and many faiths in this nation who pray. And I've got the Time magazine here that actually spoke about different faiths. It's dated 1991. It just talks about the influx of different religions into Australia and how we should acknowledge those, and it's quite an interesting read for anybody that would like to read that. Then in the following edition of Time, there was a letter in relation to the article Different Faiths in the Time magazine. And what it says is, you did not acknowledge that Christianity itself is an immigrant religion, thereby ignoring the validity of the unique religion of the Aborigines. At best, they have been neglected by a society that has largely detached itself from the true foundation of Christian principle, that is, to love thy neighbour as thyself. I wrote that letter, so it goes back a long way, this belief in the opportunity for faiths, shared faiths, to have a common ground and the ability. Now, this council now acknowledges Aboriginal culture, which is, I think, quite appropriate. Before our prayer, we acknowledge country, and I think it's important to do that because the creation story of the Gundungurra people is in this, not far from here, out at Canyon Lee. If we go and visit, we'll see the place where dreaming started for the local Gundungurra people. It's there, and you can actually walk on that spot. Now, what I'm saying is people carry faith within themselves, and that faith is not always of a Christian belief, but my belief is that it's a prayer to the same and one ultimate reality. So, councillors, I think we've come of age, and I'll say it again, unashamedly. I think that there's room, not only in this chamber, but there should be room in our hearts and in our community to accept that people have different ways of finding the same faith. And I'm asking you to support this motion tonight to allow that to happen, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor, speakers against. We've been going 4. Speakers against. Councillor Andrew.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Whipper. While I respect and understand all 6 points in this motion, a similar one at a previous meeting I supported, and truthfully I was in fear that the prayer was on its way, and this was one way of saving it in my thoughts then. So I believe that the other faiths and other Christian beliefs can be invited to this meeting without this motion. I don't think it's necessary, so I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. In favour?
No, I'd like to move an amendment.
Well, yes, you can move an amendment.
I'd move an amendment, just numbers 1 and 2. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, that's.
I haven't got a second to that.
Yes.
Councillor Andrews.
Is Councillor Andrews seconding?
Just
1 and 2.
1 and 2. Councillor Andrews is seconding Councillor Nelson's amendment, which is 1 and 2 of the rescission motion. So that's fair enough. Councillor Turlin.
I find it extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. What are you guys worried about? What, I was going to say hell, but I won't. What are you guys worried about? There's 2 Buddhist temples out at Bundanoon. One of them is multiple denomination of Buddhism. You probably wouldn't even know because you've never been there. You couldn't get... I don't understand what you guys are worried. There's a nunnery there which is also locked into the Buddhist faith. We have our citizenship ceremonies here twice a year, and probably 80% of those... Sorry?
4 times.
Okay, 4 times a year. 80% of those people are from other religions. And we're denying them an opportunity. We're denying them an opportunity.
Yeah, will you please, all councillors, direct
I don't like the camera.
conversation to the
It's the
chair.
camera that worries
But
me.
you can't get away from it. You're up there as well. So
Anyway, the issue is, freedom of speech. I don't understand why we even have the right to say we can only have one religion or one faith in this chamber. That is not right. It should be open to anybody. I just, we have a ceremony here where we ask people to do an oath or put a hand on a Bible. The oath means they have a different religion. If we get a councillor who happens to come from the Buddhist or the Muslim or Hindu, are we going to deny them the opportunity? Do they have to leave the chamber? Is that what you're asking? That's ridiculous. It should be open to all. And I'm sure our good friend here would have no trouble with that, because it's God of title, of everybody, not just one. It's from here.
Councillor Turley.
Anyway, if you guys do this again, you just... where do we go next then, Larry? Freedom of speech?
Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, I find it extraordinary as well. I mean, I'm a Church of England and very proud of it. You know what? A lot of my friends are those other religions, and they're good, decent people. What on earth are you worried about? It's a classic case of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant bunkum. And I can remember sitting in this chamber as a staff member well before 2003 when it was argued to widen it then. The same bunkum came down. This, quite frank, Christianity was it, the one I can recall. And I don't think you were there at the time. I think it was before you came on the council in 95. If not, it was during that period, but I think it was before that. And I heard the argument before and I thought, my God, I don't believe this. That here are all these other religions, and I certainly have been to the one you were talking about, the temple out there in Bundanoon or thereabouts. I've certainly attended Baha'i functions. Some very decent people I've worked with at university, for example. When I think of that, there was about 1 in 7 that were Christians, and then the rest were whole alternate lot. But this is common sense. I mean, this is about what it's all about, the higher being, and there's one in everybody's religion. I'm just absolutely astounded, and quite frank, I'm disgusted to think that people would take a view that would preclude any of those. And to be honest with you, I hope this does get airplay, and quite frank, I think it should go outside this shire in terms of some sort of publicity as to what is manifesting here in terms of people with views that are just cocooned, tunnel vision type stuff. It's time to get on with the job of embracing everybody, to be quite frank. To me, it's just common sense. And maybe the alternate views are some of the reasons we've had problems in the past, I don't know, but I certainly support this view as is very strongly.
Thank you for directing your comments to the chair, Councillor Halstead. You're the only one tonight who has. Oh, well, maybe another. Councillor Nelson.
Look, just supporting my amendment, I sort of agree with the other speakers, but this local government, this is a third tier of government. We've got the federal parliament, state parliament, so and what they do is what we do. I'll just stick with that at the moment, and that's why I've moved the amendment.
Thank you. And before Councillor, have you you'll go to speak? No, yeah, you're out of order. You've spoken once. You can speak in favour of the amendment, though.
I'll be making a statement.
Okay, before it goes back to you, Councillor Whipper, this, as Councillor Halstead has said, this has come before Council every session of councillors over that 4-year term. Every term it comes up.
No, it hasn't.
I think it probably has.
I'll prove you wrong.
Maybe even before you were elected, Councillor.
It hasn't come up.
Oh yes, it's been brought up before and we've debated it. I have voted, and I voted last time to maintain the what we have. To me, there's been no major push from any section of the community that we alter our meeting procedure and opening with prayer. Councillor Nelson's right. Federal, state government do it. I see no reason why we shouldn't follow that Christian belief. So I'll be sticking to my previous position in relation to this matter. Councillor Whipper.
Well, your Christian belief, Mr Mayor, is different than obviously Christ's Christian belief, who believe
Councillor
that
Whipper,
love
you
thy
are not
neighbour as
standing there
thyself.
to judge me.
This, look, well, we all will be judged. We all will be judged. But at the beginning, councillors, remember the opening prayer by the Reverend over here? One of the points he prayed is, may we pray for the consideration of the spirit of others. What we're doing tonight is denying the spirit of others. I mean, we can't even listen to the prayer at the opening of this council chamber. How many times have we listened to the prayer and ran into battle straight after it, forgetting every word that's come out of the lips of those people praying over us? Councillors, we stood here tonight praying, may we pray for the consideration of the spirit of others. We're denying it. It's an absolute joke to move point 1 and 2. Point 2, that we recognise that Australia is predominantly Christian and that we recognise there are others in our nation who acknowledge God through different pathways, yet we deny them the opportunity to talk or express that. That's bigotry. That is bigotry, councillors. What is this? Hey, that is a joke. We'd be better off ripping this up, throwing it out for what it's worth. That's bigotry, an insult to anybody who has any faith. Councillors, this is not just about Christians and Jews and Muslims and Baha'is and Hindus. It's inviting Catholics into this chamber. My God, Catholics to pray.
Well, I think there's a clarification here.
Councillor Gare, Catholics in this. I've been on this council 20 years.
Can I clarify so you don't make too much of a statement? The good Reverend here tonight was representing the Catholic Father.
Oh, it's the first I've heard of that.
Well, there you go.
The good Reverend down is a Presbyterian. I have never seen a Catholic priest in this chamber saying prayer.
I'm not
What is wrong with this? What are we afraid of? Councillors, we're covering our bases. If everybody prays for this, we've got to get it right somewhere, haven't we? I can't believe this, really. I really can't believe it. And I agree with Councillor Halstead. This does need to go bigger because intolerance and bigotry are words that are buzzing in my head at the moment, because if we uphold this, we acknowledge that everybody else has got a right to believe in God, but don't bloody well speak about it in our chamber. What a joke. What an absolute joke.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. No, you don't have the right.
I'm speaking for the
No,
amendment.
he's taken the notice. He's taken the right of reply. Okay, so all in favour of the notice of motion moved by the amendment. All in favour of the amendment as moved by Councillor Nelson, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson and Andrews and Gare. Those against. Councillors Turland, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. As the status quo has been, I will retain the status quo as usual and vote against. And vote for the the amendment. So the amendment now becomes the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Andrews and Gare. Those against the motion? I declare councillors Turland, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. I will use my casting vote to support the motion, and the motion is 1 and 2 of the first part of the motion. Okay, so those in no.
It's rather important, Mr. Mayor. In my opinion.
I'll take those who wish for their names to be recorded. Councillors Halstead and Whipper, McLaughlin, Turlin. Right, want your name recorded against it? Okay, thank you. And you wish to address the chair?
Just clarification, simple as that. And truly, and I won't comment on what came across the other side of the chamber, that motion as we see now, point 1 and 2, doesn't restrict who gets invited to come in here. Where does it say that? If we wish to invite a Catholic or anyone else of another belief, another faith, they should be able to be invited. It doesn't restrict them.
Thank you. There we move on to page 218, 18.6, notice of motion, 5G Telstra network, moved by Councillor Whipper. Councillor Whipper? Hang on, before you go. Seconder?
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Move second, Councillor Turley.
People might find this offensive too, I'm not sure. But there have been concerns raised about the safety of 5G Telstra network. There is also, we have from Telstra arguments that contradict that. What I'm asking councillors is for nothing more than an information session at this stage with the pros and cons, and just clarification about what local planning powers council carry in relation to the construction of the 5G network. I've actually seen video of 5G networks overseas, and vegetation has been very close to that, and one side of the vegetation has actually been burnt off through radiation. Now, I'm not sure. Everyone seems to think this is the way of the future, but at one time they thought asbestos was as well. One time they thought smoking was, going to do you good as well. What I'm saying is, councillors, if we're serious about making informed decisions, like everybody else, we should do it through adopting the precautionary principle, which is, I thought, enshrined in the Local Government Act, and the very least we can do is get some information in relation to this.
I don't think you have any, I don't see any councillor racing to put their lights on to vote against you. I think you've won this one fairly comprehensively, Councillor.
Okay, well, we'll put it. You don't want to move it, Councillor Scandrett? You don't want to move it?
I'm just making sure you have a
So unless there's any against, I'll move put the recommendation. All in favour? Aye. Against? Well done, Councillor Whipper. We win a few, we lose a few. 18.7, notice of motion, Milton Park. Councillors McLaughlin has given...
Thank you very much. Mr Mayor, you might have noted... Oh, a seconder, please.
Seconder.
Milton Park, thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, Councillor Halstead was probably one of the only people, I think he probably was part of the planning that was involved in this, Mr Mayor, so I think it's very apt that he seconds this. I'd just like to thank the people from Village 1 and from Milton Park, the hotel, who are here tonight. I'm looking at you.
Yes,
I'm looking at you. But those people behind who've sat here for 3.5 hours or whatever it is to hear this motion. And I think we've all received emails with regard to this. I thank staff for their comment on this. And I know you're very much opposed to this, Mr Mayor, on this, but all I'm asking for, and the community are asking for, is just to have a little bit of a... So my motion doesn't prejudge at all this investigation. I just want to stress that my aim in this is to ascertain what the original intent of such an important heritage development was. And it wasn't done to have build McMansions in a subdivision. It was done, Mr Mayor, to preserve a heritage item and a heritage garden. So, councillors, I know one of the concerns that you have, and Councillor Nelson has spoke to me about this, is in regard to maybe the cost that this will cost. I'd say to you today, I don't believe that those costs should be at a huge amount of money. I really think we have got probably staff that can look through the LEP and where we need to get, and I'm asking for a senior person to look at it. I know we've had a legal person look at it, but I don't know what questions were, pardon me, and what the result was, apart from it didn't go anywhere. Now, this is going to be a state heritage item listed, as we heard tonight from the manager from Milton Park, and I think she put it very well to say, you know, are we going to stand up and have a look at, it could be, you know, the demise of a heritage item? Because the original intent was for these villages to be very low key. They weren't supposed to dominate the landscape. The first village was built, as we all know, and we know that the architect, Mr. Cox, built something in situ that did not impose itself on the garden or the heritage item. Now, the second village, through amendments and all sorts of things, has now gone to something else. I believe it probably shouldn't. It was now when the 4 came through last time, and council took the opinion that they were not anywhere near reasonably close to what had been approved. We took them to the Land and Environment Court and we won it. So, councillors, I hope you'll support this, because these people need your support.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment. I spoke to Councillor McLaughlin.
The amendment?
The amendment is that council engage, council seek quotations for a suitably qualified and experienced solicitor, independent of council 123.
Okay, so your first part is the council
that council seek quotations for a suitably qualified and experienced solicitor, independent of council 2, 1, 2 and 3.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
I'm not sure.
I have a question.
No, do you, not a
clarification.
To the motion?
To the amendment.
To the amendment, I mean, to the amendment. So what is the clarification? Sorry.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask through you, I'm just trying to understand the time frame on this, because the next finance meeting is November, right? And if there's,
okay,
how does that work?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the question.
My clarification is that I'm trying to move this forward in a quicker manner than what councillor...
Okay.
Hang on.
No, I will, because...
Whoa. You're going to move that now? You're withdrawing your motion?
What I'll do is put his on the front of my motion.
Are you happy to... Yeah, I'm happy to withdraw if you want to make that. Yeah.
So, part of the motion will be the council get qualified
seek
costings first.
Quotations for a suitably qualified and experienced
solicitor. So you have to
solicitor.
take out the word engage.
Okay, I'll take that out.
Yep, because... Yep.
That way it moves it forward.
Yep. Can I explain?
Go explain.
If that...
Who's seconding it?
Well,
He's withdrawn it. You're moving that.
No.
The easy way to deal with
The motion is now changed and
Yes.
I withdraw my amendment.
Oh, you're now withdrawing your amendment.
Yeah, because
and he's changing his wording of his
to my
motion.
amendment.
My question still applies.
Well, hang on and I'll explain.
This.
Mr Mayor, I talked to Councillor McLaughlin and told him that I'm very concerned with the $100,000 figure here that's unbudgeted, unfunded for by council. And the way it reads here is that we would have to go to the Finance Committee because it's an unfunded budget item. Now, if we move that council call quotations for a solicitor, you can start doing that tomorrow. And you can call that for 21 days, 14 days, 21 days, because out there's got to be a retired solicitor somewhere who would have the time to do the work that's necessary to bring back to council so that we know the full story. Because if we start engaging senior counsel, that starts to get into a lot of money. So, and we do need to know what the history of all this is. There's as they said, there's ethical issues associated with all this, and there's people trying to take advantage of the situation out there, and there's a long history there. We've sort of heard a lot of the history before. It's complex. Let's see how much this is going to cost us, because the quotation will tell us, and then we can see if we can find it in the budget.
Councillor, no clarification. You can ask clarification when you have the mic. Councillor Turl.
Okay. Look, there's the site. There's the units in question with the people that are here. This is where the site that's been excavated, which is the issue that's been going around for a long, long time. 40-odd apartments or townhouses, 20 are built, 20 to come over here. Substantial commencement, he's changed the drawing, that's gone through its process. We have approved the process. This is a body corporate issue. This is a civil matter. It is not a council issue. It's gone beyond a council issue. It has been approved.
Councillor Turlin.
It has been approved. It's a civil matter. You're getting involved in something you should not be involved in. It's black and white. If the owners of the other apartments want to take it on, they have every right. When they bought those apartments, they knew the other 20 were going to be built in some form. They knew they were going to be built at some time. They did substantial commencement. It is a civil matter. And if you get involved in this, I would imagine, whatever the company's name is, they'll turn it around and say it's a civil matter, it's got nothing to do with council. Are you going to put ratepayers' money up to find a civil matter in relation to a body corporate issue? Does that mean another issue in town where the body corporate comes up, they're not happy with the process, we're going to support them? You're going to set a precedent.
Councillor
It is
Turlin.
not our problem. It is a body corporate issue. And you need to get your head around it, because regardless of where you go, if they want to take it to the court, they can take the issue in the civil system. The planning issue's been dealt with. Been dealt with 20 years ago. Amendments have come in and gone. And those issues have been dealt with by council staff and their recommendation, of which we voted on. And it went through its process. We cannot be wasting public money from people from all around the Shire on a civil matter. It is not right.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Councillor Scandrett.
Before I speak, I just want to read from the Code of Meeting Practice here, Mr Mayor, and I was quite carefully trying to get clarification.
You can now get clarification.
Well, I don't want to use my debate time, Mr Mayor, because, you know...
I tell you what, Councillor Scandrett, I'll be so good to you.
Oh, that'll
I
be
will
a
ask
change.
that the stop be clocked,
Okay.
the clock be stopped, as to what area of clarification you
All right,
want.
Mr.
And then
Mr
the
Mayor,
clock
Councillor
will
Turner's
start.
touched on it, and that is, and I hear the...
Clarification, what is the question, or I will...
Councillor Turner has touched on it, and that is the process. And I want to know, okay, there's an amendment, how do we fund it? Now, the GM may
Okay.
be... And this
Stop.
is the bit in here.
Stop.
Finance Committee.
Please resume your seat.
And what time frame? And in consideration, and
Okay,
to
so
consider
the
the work.
clarification is, how long will it take to engage a solicitor to get a costing and the time frame? Madam General Manager, and then you have the right to speak.
Councillor, it's stated in the report. I will quote from the report. Should council support this motion, which requires the engagement of a solicitor, you've obviously taken out senior counsel, which would incur significant expenditure not currently provided in council's adopted operational plan, under clause 3.13 of council's Code of Meeting Practice, the matter is required to be referred to a future finance committee to identify a source of funds. So it would have to go to a finance committee before anything would happen, is my view.
Now, you have the right to resume speaking. The question has been answered. Can we return off our mics for Councillor Skinner?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, and that is the quandary here. I mean, I'm very supportive of the issues that have been raised by various parties out there, but the time frame of this, with the November finance meeting, right, really, where are we going with this? Councillor Turland has talked a bit about, I guess, the flow on from this. I'm not in that space. I'm in the space of, if there's works being undertaken out there, maybe we should have gone there today and had a look, I don't know. And so on. We won't have this report until the new year, because it's got to go through the next finance meeting.
You won't have it then either.
Am I correct with that, Mr.
I would say if that is what you're looking, I'd say May next year.
Yes. So the question I'm asking, and I'd really like somebody to answer it, is how is this going to work? Right? I'm not ignoring the issues, but anyway, I'll leave it to you, the next speakers.
Councillor Halstead.
Yes, I certainly won't take 3 minutes. I'm very concerned to ensure that what we have done to date, including those things which I did in 80-odd, in the 80s, or the council of the day did in the 80s, everything that's followed is correct. Do I sit here and accept everything the staff said? Absolutely no way, no one do I do that. And quite frankly, they'd be silly if they followed it themselves, with all due respect. That statement by the staff there is a stab in the dark, a pull out of the clouds. Might be right, might be wrong, who knows, it's a guess. No more than a guess. You and I can do the same thing, what do we think? 50,000, 70,000, depending upon who's involved. To talk about May next year is just ridiculous, with all due respect to you, Mr Mayor. I know that you know what you're talking about, but that one you're wrong on. But in terms of when it could come, it could well be done by November, if that's the issue, an operational issue with regard to finance. My God, it wouldn't take someone like you said yourself, a retired solicitor. We've got plenty of them in this district, and by the way, they've been a lot further than a solicitor, sitting in this shire that could sit down and go through this. This is not finger pointing at anyone, not at all. But wouldn't it be nice to know that what has been done to date is all kosher? In other words, it's been followed exactly, because let me tell you, I've seen a lot of very doubtful things go on in terms of interpretation. In other words, doubtful as in, are they really sure about offering us this advice? Staff, this lot of staff, the previous lot, different councils I've been on, and you've had to go with the best advice you've been given. Now, I don't accept any of those last two paragraphs, quite frankly, because they are a stab in the dark. I know it's an effort, but it's a classic case of staff trying to defend a situation that might get out of hand. So it's not unreasonable for them to say that, but I'm not looking at that in terms of weighing anything based on that. So I think it would be very wise to have a look at it. It may well be argued it's a body corporate issue. Well, I think it's far more than that, but I think that's part of it. And I think to myself occasionally, when looking at the issue in detail sometime when I've got nothing else on my mind, I can understand why people up there would be very annoyed about this. Because what they would have done is followed what had gone on before as being the law of the day, etc., planning law. So I certainly, at this stage, will be supporting that. I'm wondering whether we should put an upper figure on it. That's the only thing that worries me a bit. But again, I'd be doing a stab in the dark. So do I really know what that is? No, I don't. But this is a very important situation that should be established once and for all. Yes, we can do that, or no, we shouldn't have done that, or this is the way we ought to go. So to me, it's indefensible not to have a shot and look at it, and it may well then be used as a precedent, but in terms of the future, in terms of this is the way it should be handled. I don't think I have seen a more complex planning issue in my career, and that's longer than anyone sitting around here.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks Mr Mayor, well, I'm supporting the recommendation. I thank Councillor Nelson for putting in that precursor, because I think it's beholden on us to seek quotations so we can get a true estimate of the costs that may be associated with this. I think it would be irresponsible to ignore our responsibility. Excuse me, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. I think it would be irresponsible of us as councillors to ignore our responsibilities in terms of planning. There's some issues here I think that we need clarification around. It goes back a long way. And the basic premise is we ask that question. Is everything complying? Is it kosher? Is everything done right? Let's get an independent assessment of that. And at the end of the day, that assessment will tell us if we need to do anything or not. So, why would we be struggling or arguing over this? It seems pretty clear cut. Anyone that would vote against it, I think, is missing the point completely.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Nelson, are you speaking?
Just point of clarification. I have spoken, Mr Mayor. But,
yes, you have spoken. So,
point of clarification in that we've got a finance meeting next Wednesday, haven't we?
Yes.
So
the agenda has already gone out and closed.
Yeah, I would think that Councillor McLaughlin or myself might move as a matter of urgency that we might find some money to allocate when the figure comes back. But
you will have to do the motion that's been put before you.
Yeah, we'll work on it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin, what are you doing? You're taking
gonna,
right of reply?
I'll wait till everyone's spoken.
Yeah, well, Councillor Andrews.
For the second time tonight, I'm going to be in disagreement from across the table, and for the sake of not being hounded down, believe me, what the facts I repeat or talk about here are genuine. The only thing that will change slightly is that the SC, the Special Counsel, has been removed. Is that correct? It's been removed now? It's not a Special Counsel you're asking for. Councillor McLaughlin's motion makes no attempt to justify the reasons for such an inquiry, although reading Mr Rowe's 9-page email, it could be construed as his terms of reference for such an investigation by two independent lawyers. One was requested as a senior counsel and the other one as a senior solicitor. A senior solicitor is $300+ an hour. For what it's worth, a senior counsel is $1,000+ an hour. So the $100,000 that's been mentioned, it may cost council, I believe, is light on and still light on due to the fact that we've moved, or because of the fact we've removed a senior counsel. The cost of the ratepayers with Village 1 alone could and probably would be in excess of $190,000, I believe. That's Village 1 alone, if we read this as it's supposed to be read. These costs will be also compounded by internal disruption, much internal disruption and loss of productivity to council. What is proposed seeks to simply an inquiry into council staff and councillors, to have them put pressure on the Doblers in relation to a range of matters, most of which, as mentioned by Councillor Turlin, probably all of them, has nothing to do with council. Since 1989, 30 years ago, and up to 2016, 8 applications have been lodged with council to modify Village 2. All 8 were recommended for approval by the planners. The last 2 were refused by council in 2016 and 17 in this chamber. Interestingly, in 2011, the approval, which is now well underway, was supported by Councillor Housestead, moved by Councillor Gare and seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. It was approved in chamber. When the Doblers bought the property 25 years ago, there was a shambles.
Councillor McLaughlin.
And it's reasonable now to mention, at that time, staff recommended, and we all are aware, we've been there enough times, the hayloft was to be demolished. They recommended it be demolished. It was a shambles. The building has been brilliantly restored to what it is today. That's the type of work they're doing on that property. The main objective, Mr Rowe, has been only living in this area, in this property, for 5 years. He's trying to speak with authority on matters starting 36 years ago. He's asking council to expend large amounts of ratepayers' money as his own private agenda where there is no value of public interest. The Doverlers in this matter are simply bystanders. They lodged a Section 96(2) modification in 2011, which was and is always their right as the owners of the property. The application was successful.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews, if you can turn your light off. Councillor McTurland, you're doing what?
I'm speaking against it.
Against the so you're
Without
speaking...
the motion, because it's been back and forth.
Okay, I just...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the motion was changed.
That's why I'm going to speak. Yeah.
So now you're speaking against the motion that...
Yeah. And I'm going to ask the
that's
mover and
cutting the
seconder if
line.
they would consider adding item 4, and if it's that important, if this is where we're going to go with it, that the body corporate funds either all of it or half of this cost, because it is a civil matter. It is not... Well, you are putting your hands in the rest of the public's pocket to fight a civil matter, and you are challenging... This is where it's really quite interesting. You are challenging past planners' reports, approval by past councils, either removals or approvals on Section 455 variation, the old Section 96. You are challenging our staff from many, many years gone back that they've made a mistake. The issue is clear today, as I showed you on the iPad. There was always going to be 40-odd townhouses. 20-odd have been built, and the other 20 were going to be built somewhere back there. The 20 in front are not impacted by the 20 in the back. And when they bought those properties in the front, they would have known, if they didn't, that the other 20 were going to be built at the back. And if they didn't know, they didn't do their due diligence properly. It is not right. This is a civil matter. It's got nothing to do. And it's no different. You know, if you're expecting Councillor Nelson, he lives in a townhouse with a body corporate issue. So you want council to go and support him in an issue that there might be a problem with the neighbour? It is not right. It's a body corporate issue. Let the owners of the site put their hand in their pocket and see if they want to take it to the next step. We have done everything through council staff and the process to get it where it is today. Done nothing wrong. And if the owner has to request to put another 455 variation in on that Section 8, he has every right to. But you can't tie the rest of the community up in something that's a civil matter. You are going to set a precedent. And I would believe, if you go down this path, the first thing the lawyer's going to say, or the senior counsel, is, you're out of your depth, it's got nothing to do with us.
Thank you. And before you get the right of reply, I've never agreed with Councillor Turlin so much in that councillors, you are putting yourself on a slippery slope. My understanding, and staff can correct me, there is a DA live on the property. A DA has been issued and commenced. And you think, as councillors, that we can stop that without an impost to this council, to the ratepayers, of how many $1 million? You try and stop this DA, and the owners have every right to go to court and go legal costs of theirs against council, plus whatever they might get out of the court. Now, I did homework on this, and Councillor McLaughlin is right. I am dead opposed to what is being proposed, because I asked the General Manager to get senior council advice on the legality of our decision. We got that. We got it through Shaw and Reynolds. We then had an information session where the staff told councillors that if you take this on and support a review of this, and you are opening yourself up for something that, you know, you could put council in a very liable position. And you're not going to get any support from the general population out there. You know, if they find you're going to cost... And I said, Councillor House said, may disagree with my May of next year. Do you know where all the files are on this? They're not in this building. They're up in Fort Knox, as we call it. Some of them, since 1983, could have been lost. Who's going to go up there and go through all those documents to try and piece together a DA which is now live, which has commenced, as Councillor Turland has pointed out? If you are so passionate about this, in stopping this development going ahead, put your hand in your pocket. I agree. And you start the class action, not council, because there is no way I will support it. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, I started off by saying I wasn't going to prejudge what was going to come out of the investigation. You have done that. I haven't done that.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh,
either.
yes, you have. You're saying stop this development. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that when Councillor Halstead here was a planner, he was involved in what was set up for this community. It was one of the first done in the state, probably, to preserve. How do you preserve a heritage building, a heritage garden? And sure, this is what came forward. It was a unique one. It's probably one we should have used on Redford Park, because the first one worked very well. And I did support and I did second those changes that were made. But it was in the ownership then to support a heritage item. It's not owned anymore by then. The direction of what planners like Councillor Halstead did in the day was in regard to supporting a heritage item. This was never set up to be a subdivision for McMansions. It was to preserve a heritage item. I'm not prejudging what's going to come out. Let someone have a look. Let someone see if we have strayed from the path. If we've gone somewhere, okay, maybe you're right. But these people sitting here tonight who have come in, who was going to protect the LEP? We set up, this council set up an LEP, which it's not just a civil matter, because council was very much involved in this, Mr Mayor. The LEP and all those easements were set up. They were set up by this council for it to go forward. No one probably envisaged that someone would sell off bits and pieces and then, as we know, it goes with the land. And so therefore, we got a few changes, but now what have we got? Have we lost our direction? This would tell us. Councillor Nelson is right, and I thank him very much for putting this forward, because all we're doing, if we can bring this forward, I don't expect to spend millions on this, but what is heritage? What's a state heritage item worth? Are we just going to roll over and say, oh, well, too bad. DA started, we're just going to let it go on. You can't see it from the other village? Well, that's not right. It was a plan that planners like Councillor Halstead put in place at the time to support it and not be something that was going to be a tourist bloody Disneyland next to a heritage item. These people have got every right to come in here and say, this is your responsibility, council, because it's in the LEP. We set it up. Okay, it might be a bit of corporate. These people have put their hand in their pocket before. They'll probably put their hand in again. And the situation might be that we are might be dragged into something where, if we'd just done an investigation to make sure everything you say, Mr Mayor, is correct, that we followed all the proceedings, we haven't disappeared down some rabbit hole.
Thank you.
Councillors, please.
So we have the recommendation as moved by Councillor McLaughlin and Halstead. All in favour of that recommendation, please raise your hand. Councillors Nelson, Halstead, Whipper and McLaughlin. Those against. Councillors Scandrett, Turlin, Andrews and Gare. We have a 4-tie vote. As such, I'll be using my casting vote to defeat the motion and declare the motion lost. We now move on to page 18.9, notice of motion, Mary Street, sorry.
18.8.
Oh, 18.8, one before. Notice of motion, Glebe Estate.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yep, thank you. I'll just have this to be noted. But just before I do, if I can just take a couple of minutes to thank staff. The comments they made here are very apt. Sorry?
Yeah.
I'll move in a second for it to be noted. Can you do that? Thank you. Yeah. Basically, if I can just quickly speak to it. The staff have come back to say this is, and I did have someone who was going to speak to this tonight, but I told them that, look, I was going to pull this and just have it noted. I had a very prominent person from my Heritage Committee who was happy to support this, but I said, look, because basically what's happened now, we all know that council here supported what they thought would be a good idea to have a hospice. That has gone from this site, and the landowner now, I believe, has gone public, and he said that he's not going to use that DA. So at the moment, the heritage of the glebe is still intact. So I'll say that I'm pleased that that's the case, and I thank staff for their report. The only thing I'll say is that I'm hoping that the Heritage Committee will come back with a really strong support of our DCP to support Barrel's Heritage Conservation Area in the glebe. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So I think there's no need for any other speakers. I'll put that all in favour. Those against, carried. We now move on to 18.9, notice of motion, Mary Street, Mittagong. Councillor Turley, do you have a seconder?
I'll second it. Thank you. Have you got that video to play for me, please? What you're going to see at the moment is a video that clearly shows the wind, if it's around the right way.
I'd give it a break.
It's all right. Up the top corner.
View.
Can't do it.
In the view menu, rotate right.
Okay. Now you can see the vicinity they're hanging over the trees, over the top of the properties. There's only 4 lots in relation to that. The first one you see here is the house that Mr Smith spoke about his children and his grandchildren. And council has removed one of the trees as per the arborist. We might play it again if you can, if we see how you go anyway. And it clearly shows that the wind in these trees, it is going to cause a lot of trouble down the path. And I have photos here which is going to be hard to show, but the video clearly shows they are dangerous. Now we've cut the first tree down close to the letterbox. And for some unknown reason, the tree behind it is a V-jointed tree, is still left there because our independent arborist, who council won't release the report to, these 4 owners, have no idea why they removed a very good tree and left a forked tree leaning towards the house intact. This is a photo here, and you can see an orange strap that I took only this week. Council staff have been out and strapped it because they're concerned about it falling down. But I think they've strapped the wrong tree. I think they've strapped it because of this work here done by the gas company, which is in between the tree which has been strapped. But I didn't get photos of the excavation. That is the tree that has been taken out, recommended by the arborist, we were told. And the fork tree behind it, which is leaning towards the house, is still intact. It doesn't make an ounce of sense.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Have I finished my 3 minutes?
You have.
What a shame, I have so much more to say.
Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, well, I'll support what he said. Quite frankly, I don't think the trees have got any integrity at all. If you start excavating around gum trees or eucalypts, whatever you want to call them, that do not have tap roots, you're in trouble. And there's a lot of that's occurred with those trees. We know recently it's the gas company, but there was other public authorities before that. I'm astounded that anyone would come up with a recommendation that would say leave them trees there. Are they part of a koala habitat? I don't have that opinion, but then again, I'm not going to step into an area I know nothing about. I'd be amazed if any koala would be going to walk along, crawl along, whatever else, that strip. However, someone's come up with a brilliant idea, it's part of a koala habitat, so we've got to accept that. But those trees will fall. I can guarantee you that. One of those or more will fall. I refer you to the Shoalhaven case, which most people just seem to want to flick out of the window, just forget about it. You know, the poor guy asked for the council to remove it twice. No, falls over, and who does it kill? Him. And staff sitting here now would be well aware of that case, as would be anyone working in local government in terms of gum trees, for God's sake. They kill people. Found out the other day in Elm did, but most unusual. These trees, in my opinion, should not be there. The council has an obligation, in my view, and I'll say that in a court of law if ever I'm called, in terms of it being the approval authority for those houses in that situation, now knowing what's happened with those roots and those trees and doing nothing about it, because that's what's happened, effectively. We can argue that we've had our own arborist report. I don't know, probably, I assume, I hope, but then to just dismiss, I wonder if it was even read, but to just dismiss someone's arborist report, well, I don't know it's been read. I assume it's been read, Madam GM. Let's hope so. But what would give that priority over the other one? I mean, an arborist, there's many arborists, it depends what standard and all the rest of it, but I've seen arborists give reports on trees and say there's nothing wrong with them. Within a month, they're gone. They've fallen over. So just to inspect something, I don't know, there's things you've got to do to those trees, and I'm not going to be told, you know, by someone that doesn't know what they're doing about these trees are safe, because in my view, they are not safe.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, Mark, what? I'm standing in for it. No, look, I'll agree with you, yeah, Councillor. When gum trees have their roots cut, and no one, even if the best arborist in the world, I don't think you can tell what's under the ground and what the roots are left, because I had a tree very similar to that, Mr Mayor, that was on a driveway at my place at Marilba Road in Barrow, where they'd cut through that, and it might have been there for 10 years, but in a big wind, it came down. And when it came down, you could see where the roots had been cut. And once they're cut, that's it. They just stay there. You know, they're weak on one side. You get the wind on the right side, boom, they're going to go. Now, I mightn't have supported Councillor Turland on this, but I do know the fact that they chopped very close and put, what was it, gas and sewer and whatever, water and whatever, right on that verge, cutting through the roots of the trees. They're susceptible. Councillor Halstead's right. You know, they'll fall over. I'm just wondering about the cost now. We should have had the developer pay for this. It'll probably come back to council now. I'll leave.
Councillor Scandrett.
Could I have a clarification, Councillor Turland? Just, the staff say which part of Mary Street, or is it the whole of Mary Street?
No, there's only 4 lots. I've actually got.
Councillor Whipper. Councillor...
Yeah, you go first.
Councillor Whipper.
Right. Look, ordinarily, I'd obviously be on my feet, you know, fighting to save these trees. What I find the sad thing is that these utilities, these services, you know, just got no respect at all. You know, we can endeavour, at least we can see the butchering that's going on, but when roots are cut on trees of this size, it's just a time bomb ticking away, just waiting. You know, we know that it destabilises. It's just really a shame that there's not some accountability on those utilities like Endeavour and Telstra and AGL or whoever it is that actually perpetrates this sort of damage to these trees. Yeah, that's right.
Councillor McLaughlin.
And possibly, you know, when we're looking at subdivision, we should take into account distance of trees like this from the development footprint. And also, you know, there's been so many occasions when we've actually sent staff out, we've put barriers around trees to ensure that the roots of the trees aren't cut and that that's maintained. But in this instance, and looking at the video, and knowing, as we do, that the roots have been disturbed like that, like I said, it's a time bomb, just waiting to, you know, tick at the right time, and that'll be the end of it. So I'll have to support the motion in this instance.
Thank you. Councillors? Any other councillor?
There's only 4 lots.
So this is a clarification.
Yes, that's right.
There's only 4 lots. I don't have the exact subdivision plan. This is the electrical supply plan I've got here. 101 is where the video's been taken, showing the house that's been built, which Mr Smith spoke on. And there's the new house being built right next door, a vacant block, and then the one in question, which has already been built, which has started this whole process, which has now got the whole trees all around their problem as well. So there's only 4 lots which relate to. And it's again, what I brought up today with staff is that the other land owned by that owner, how many more blocks are going to be put in behind there?
Okay,
Well,
that's
I've clarified it. Your turn to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I do remember the Shoalhaven case. The fellow complained to the council on a number of occasions, wanting to get the tree cut down, and then the tree actually fell down and killed him. So it was very unfortunate. That being the case with that, I appreciate why Mr Smith came in, but I did take what he was saying as a threat, and I wished he would have couched his words in a different way, because I don't think people should be coming in and threatening councillors and the General Manager in that manner. So I hope Mr Smith takes that on board, because I think he does have the numbers at the moment. But we did an on-site inspection out there, Mr Mayor, and we were told that the koalas use those trees as a way of moving through there. So, what's that?
Never seen one.
Well, you know, that's because they move at night. But what you've got to do is go back to the subdivision, and you've got to ask the question, what happened there with the subdivision? Because at the on-site inspection, you know, the land just goes straight down there, and blind Freddie could see that those trees are on an angle and those houses are threatened. So, you know, the developer did that, we approved it, and as Councillor Turlin said, there's houses around the back there and what's happening there as well. So maybe we should be reviewing that actual subdivision and how that all came about, and maybe learn from it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, I've handed the documents from Councillor Turlin to Mr Pepping just to try and describe those 4 lots that we're talking about, the trees in front of.
I think what you're saying is that the 4 lots, Councillor Turlin
not the
has
whole of Mary
emphasised
Street.
only 4 lots, not all the trees in Mary Street.
Yeah. That's a better plan. So subject to Mr Pepping may be able to just describe that, I'm supporting this. I mean, we've been back and forth to Mary Street on these sort of matters for a while, and also access. And I continue to be concerned about the access into one of those houses. We saw on inspections today a steeper driveway. Again, anyway, we need to look into how those things get through. But yes, I'm supporting this, Mr Mayor, but for those 4 blocks. Thank you.
Only. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'm listening across the chamber with the fact that the roots have been compromised. That's reason enough, I believe, to remove the trees. But I'll just make the point as well. The young families moved into new homes there. The height of those trees blowing in the type of wind we had last week would be terrifying. You'd be on eggshells all night with a young family. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Before you have your right of reply, I'd like to make comment. My name was mentioned tonight. I take offence at that. Councillor Nelson is right. I am allowed my point of view, and for those people who may not be aware, I have a tree that makes these trees look like toothpicks, 20 metres from my house, on the western side. And I chose to live there. So, and I am 20 metres from the national park on the northern side. I chose to live there. So we make choices in life, and I do not believe that should be held against a person who makes a comment. Somebody could say to me, "What did you move there for?" Because I wanted to. I take that responsibility. But I also take the point raised in relation to the concerns by the people. And you go around the corner in Mary Street, and as Councillor Whipple will know, we had a major reversal in diametrically opposed to what we are looking at tonight. We were going to be hung, drawn and quartered as councillors for cutting down trees. So before people charge in and criticise councillors as a whole and going to hold the organisation and councillors personally accountable, we have to grapple with these every virtually meeting. And if it's not you, if it's not Mary Street, it's going to be one in Glebe Street that a guy's come in because Argyle Housing's got a monster of a tree and he rang me last week. So please don't be too critical of council. We have a policy. And the only way councils can change a policy, staff can't. The only people who can change a policy is councillors. Council staff get picked on because they look at something and say it is structurally sound. You can't get any worse tree wind than last Saturday or Sunday. So I'll support this mainly for the concerns, and I do think they're genuine from the residents. They have young children. I do not want to be seen as setting a precedent because this can have a bit of a flow-on effect, and I think we have to be able to justify the reasons. And Councillors Whipper and Turland and I think maybe Scandrett raised the point about the trees being compromised. So Councillor Turland.
Okay, let's just recap on a few things. This particular plan here shows the trees and where the block is. There's only 4 lots, pretty well 5. This doesn't have many trees on it which relate to it. Now the problem that related to here is that this particular subdivision really only affects those 4 lots, and that's because beyond there is a dead-end street and it goes to where Renwick is taken over. And all the houses, it's the back of the houses that face Mary Street, not the front. That's one of the problems, the distance of the houses to the front of their blocks. So what we've got is all these other lots down through the side here which have families living in them now. We now have 2 families going to live in the 2 houses that are built. 2 more are going to be built. One's being built now, so there's 3. And you have all this other subdivision which we've noticed today come through the building development process. Another subdivision from the same area, same owner, has lodged. So what we're going to have is a multiple of families living in this area. But the problem I see is that these trees have been left here for the purpose of, in theory, for the koalas, or I understand it was the vision of down in Renwick. That's what the owners on the other side of the road want. They didn't want to see Renwick. This doesn't relate to here. This is totally different. And so what's happened, a mistake's been made, and the trees being left there don't comply with our own standards for a subdivision. The developer has not pulled them out. He's not put in the trees as our tree master plan process. He's not done the footpath. He's done the road, he's done the curb, he's done the power and all the other infrastructure items. But he hasn't done the footpath. He hasn't put the trees as per our own standard, our own DCP. So what we've got is a problem that now we face. Now maybe there's an opportunity for the other subdivision that's coming through, maybe we get him to pay for this. Maybe there's a way we can twist it, I don't know. It's the same owner, but I'll let you guys determine that. This is the Hills Council in Sydney, where it says, Council has supported automatically, passed a law automatically allowing residents to chop down trees that threaten their homes. Law in the Hills Shire. Let alone with all the people that have been killed by trees in the last, well, there's one in Katoomba, I think a son and a mother, she was a paramedic, got killed by a tree. There was another one in Melbourne only this last week, and then there was another one in Sydney as well.
A lot of trees out.
So, I'm going to show you a photo now, and this is the top of one of the houses, full of debris. They get up there regularly and they clean it. It's not going to be long before there's a branch going through the roof. There is no other option but to pull the trees down. Now the terming on that's going to cost money. How do we do that? Is it over time?
You're over time.
I'm over time. But
You're
maybe
over,
that's
you're
what I
over
do.
time.
It'll go to the finance committee.
That's what I'm saying. We need to, you know what I'm saying.
Okay. I would suggest that I have trouble with some of these, both one at 1 and 2. I would suggest that the voted in seriatim, because I think there's two separate issues here. So I'm going to ask councils.
It will automatically.
It automatically go. So I'm asking councillors whether they will vote for this in seriatim because there's two issues. Okay. So I put would you move that, Councillor House? Then moved in seriatim, seconded Councillor Nelson. Put it, all in favour, against, carried. So we move 1. The council remove all trees in Mary Street, Mittagong. Of those four, now it has to be worded. Yeah, in the
53 to 71. No, we've got the street numbers.
We got the street numbers. Okay, not per the resolution, as per the screen, not the printed. So everybody who supports item 1, please raise your hands. That's carried unanimously. We have 2 that a concrete footpath be constructed, blah, blah, blah. I put that as in seriatim. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett and Turlett. Those against? Councillors McLaughlin, Halstead, Whipper, Andrews, Nelson and Gare. I declare that lost. We now move on to page 1810, page 223, notice of motion, Mary Street, Mittagong. Councillor Turlett.
It's probably irrelevant now because...
Okay, then you move that it be noted.
Noted, yep.
Move that it be noted. All in favour, those against, carried. Councillor Turlin,
No.
Okay, 1811, notice of motion, development applications briefing session. Councillor Turland.
You know, if you read comments,
I'll second it.
staff comments, and the reason is because we actually get calls as councillors from different people saying that that there's not enough time that they've been given to make a decision or make a report or come back to council with the 14 and 21 days. It's just not enough time. And then the other problem I face in phone calls that I've got, and I'm sure you guys have the same, is that council staff will ask for one thing, and then 2 weeks later they'll ask for another thing. It should be the whole thing so that it's wrapped up in one package. And you can't keep changing the ball game. You can do, because council staff can do that, but I just think it needs to be more diligent, that we don't keep putting applicants to keep changing. I don't want to talk about one because our Deputy General Manager is part of that group, but it's to do with a shed, and wanted to know a planting plan for it. He produced that, and then 2 weeks later he said, I now want to know an acoustic
Okay,
report.
well, you bring in we'll stick to the motion.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. The problem is it kept on changing.
Okay.
And then he was given 7 days to give, I won't say who it is, and that's the problem. It's just it needs to be controlled in one letter at one time, not again and again, and keep moving the ball game. So this is just for a briefing session for councillors, so we can hear what council staff have got to say, and hopefully we then understand it. So we can actually tell the community when they ring us what is going on. Because at the moment, I'm only hearing it from the applicant side, not from the council staff.
Happy to have a briefing session.
Okay,
Yep.
so we've moved that we have a briefing.
Yep. Just look, I'll just speak to it briefly. Sometimes people put in applications and they get grants, and they've got a time frame on that, Mr. Mann. I'm looking at you. You're looking at me.
I can't take my eyes
Oh,
off
good
it,
on you. Good
Councillor
on you.
Lock.
You know, sometimes there are time frame. People get grants and they've got to do things in a certain period. And as Councillor Turlin says, if they keep coming back 2 weeks later and 2 weeks later, I'll do this for us now and do that for us, it's just not on. People just, you know, no wonder they come to us and complain. If they can all go in, unless in a session we can hear what the problem is from staff, that would be good.
Okay, I'm going to pull this short. All in favour of the recommendation as moved by Councillor Turlin and Scandra, please say aye. Against, carried. Page 225, 18.12, notice of motion, vegetation clearing permit applications under vegetation in non-rural areas. Councillor Turlin.
We are happy to do that. We've done it, but we'll do it again.
Well, I think we need to because there's obviously some issues out there with some of our...
Put the recommendation as moved by Councillor Whipper and who are councillors, Turland and Halstead. 18.3, put it all in favour, those against carried. Page 226, 1813, notice of motion, Station Street upgrade spreadsheet. Councillor Turland.
Thank you. This has been
Do
going
you
on...
have a seconder?
Yes. It's been going a long time, too long. And what we seem to get to is a point of when we've gone to the public, sold them a story, the next thing, it can't happen because we actually haven't followed a process and got approval. We've actually designed something on somebody else's land. It might be government land, it's somebody else's land. I find that extraordinary, that we've gone to the public without actually knowing. So what I'm trying to say here is that this has been going on so long. We have allocated money, we've increased the budget, we've gone to the public, got approval, and our hands are tied behind our back because we can't start because we designed something over Sydney Trains land. So what you see there is what I think needs to be done so that we understand that this project is going to be started before the end of this term of council, but I like to think it's going to be started before the end of this year. And the reason why I say that is because we've gone so far with everybody, but we can't go anywhere because we've tied ourselves in knots because we designed something on somebody else's land. Madness.
No, sorry, Councillor Turland. You go so far and it's correct. Then you go the next stage and it is totally incorrect without doing the homework, without saying, well, we hadn't the design concept because we didn't, the community didn't say they wanted to say the avenue or trees. We had to change the design. You've got to be fair dinkum when you address council.
Well, no, I actually am fair dinkum. Here's the design, Councillor Mayor. The Mayor, we actually designed it through somebody else's land and we went to the public without their approval. What I've got in front of you now is a simple process. We change the staging. We go from the railway bridge in Wingecarribee Street to Barrel Street. That is stage one, up here on the board. Stage two can be after we renegotiate or pay for or build another car park somewhere. Leave that for another stage. We have the money to start the work from the bridge to Barrel Street.
Councillor Turland, we have been told categorically or virtually categorically by Infrastructure New South Wales, until you have your land acquisitions in order and you commence, see your $7.5 million go somewhere else.
We're only doing stage one. We had two stages before. we're now having 3 stages. Now, I understand that we're going to have a briefing session on it, which is in the report here, and I understand that we're going to redevelop the roundabout down the other end of town in Bundaroo Street so that we actually don't get tied in knots with the Sydney Trains issue. Now, I assume that's going to happen, but put that aside. Let it go through its path, because it's got to go through the RMS, it's got to go through a whole range of issues. We can fix a problem between the railway bridge and Barrel Street now by start. It's an 18 months to 2 year work just to do that work. You've done the surveys, you know where the services are, you know what you need to do there. Why are we tying ourselves up in the other end of town, which we're not going to start for another year or 2 years? Because that's what it's going to take. You're not going to do a whole lot in 2 years, it won't happen. So this is a staging that I've been put forward tonight that allows the General Manager to start this project before the end of this year. Now, my suggestion is that we go to Sydney, we go to Infrastructure New South Wales and we ask them, if we change the staging, will you allow us to start?
We have. We've done it.
I don't know what you've done because you don't seem to tell us much. So I'm asking you now.
Yeah, well, you don't want to talk to me, so there you go.
Well,
now,
don't let me start on Berrimah Overpass then. This is an opportunity. If you think I'm on the wrong path...
Thank you, Councillor Turl. Time's up.
Yeah, but you spoke 15 times when I was trying to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Turl. Now, I'm going to, before Councillor Nelson speaks, you say you don't know what's... in the last Friday week, we met with Nathaniel Smith, the GM, Barry Paul and myself. On Monday, when after a JO meeting in Canberra with the GM, we met with Wendy Tuckerman. We have been to see Paul Toole, and we are still, and I signed off on another letter to him today. On Wednesday of last week, we went down and we had a meeting to be with Ms Shelley Hancock, Minister for Local Government. We got caught in a traffic jam in the M5. Instead of getting there at 10:30, we got there, well, we were an hour and a half late. So we met with her juniors. Now, they've all been told that we are exhausting every avenue before I go public on it. And I mean Sydney media public, as well as the local press, but Sydney to get attention. But I do not want any member of Parliament to be able to stand up and say, we haven't been approached, we weren't told, what's this council all about? Now, I'm going to do one more, and that will be writing directly to the Premier, because she is the only person who can take the money from an infrastructure, New South Wales infrastructure project. She doesn't have to give a reason, but she can take it. So, for councillors to seem to think that I'm not doing anything, or council staff, we just cannot do any more. And unless someone has knowledge of people who can pull a door off its hinges, then we are just going along, and whether we're being patted on the head, I don't know. But I can't do any more. And I will take exception, neither can staff, that we're not trying. So we can, and the Minister Toole was told everything that you have said, Councillor Turlin, the time frames that we've been told by Infrastructure New South Wales we can't start. He didn't say, well, I'll fix that. He didn't look and say, well, I'll ring up Infrastructure New South Wales for you and get this mobilised. We've got this merry-go-round of revolving doors. and I'm over it. But unless you can give me a better strategy before we go the next step, then please let me know. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks.
well, please resume your seat, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah.
Please. This building stage 2 first has got no way of getting up because and it's the wrong area anyway, and I'll never support it. But we went to the state government with a $12.5 or $13 million request to build Station Street, or 10.5 or whatever. We got 7.5. So we're 2.5 million short straight up. And it was on the condition of the land that we have set aside for stage 1. That's what the funding we wanted. If you go and ask for that, you may as well just kiss it all goodbye. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, that's pretty true, Mr Mayor. If you do stage 2, you're going to cause more problems than by doing stage 1. So forget it. But you're right, Mr Mayor. We need to get the land acquisition from State Rail, and then we can move forward. But when you're talking to one government agency and trying to get something done, it's pretty hard anyway. But when you're talking with two, like Infrastructure New South Wales and State Rail, the head honchos there, it's impossible. So that's why it's delayed, and that's why we're going to the ministers. And those ministers are failing us. And this is the state government's utopia moment. The ABC could do a story on this. I mean, the things that Mr Paul's told us and the things that you've just explained now about what we've done and what ministers we've approached, it's a joke. You go and watch the new Utopia series that's coming out. That's the state government through and through, and we're the ones being affected. So, and I think you're right, Mr Mayor. I think you should get all that correspondence that we've done, put it all together and send it off to the Premier and go, Premier, this is what's holding up a $15 million project in this Shire. You want to get things moving, you want the Shire, the state of New South Wales to be the best state in the country. Well, here's a $15 million project you can get going by giving the head of New South Wales State Rail a kick up the behind and get it to the land so we can move forward. As simple as that. And what Mr Paul's told about the numbers and State Rail thinking that they own the car parking spaces that we actually own is a complete joke. So, come on, let's get the state, let's get the Premier all those letters and see what a complete debacle this is from our federal MPs.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Whipper, and then Councillor Halstead.
Look, we're having an information session on this coming up. Hopefully by then we'll have some clarity and maybe some vision and direction of where we should be going. I think there's merit in the proposal that Councillor Turlin's put up there. I think it's worthy of further discussion, maybe not tonight, but I do. If the impasse is around, that parking space and that precinct that it clashes with State Rail, why can't we get on further down the road and start putting pieces in place? As I noticed Councillor Scandrett doesn't meet with his plan, but nothing much does it, unless it's got his name on it. No problem.
Okay, yeah,
An
I think you
observation.
should withdraw that.
Okay.
It's getting late
That was
at night.
tongue in cheek.
Let's
I'm sorry.
try and
Forgive me. I didn't mean that. No, I didn't mean that. No. But I think that there's merit in it, and I think we should look at it because let's get the project started. Really, if we can start on the land that's not in conflict. What it does, it gives us the opportunity to look at Wattle Street, some more opportunities to provide more parking, and then we can go back to the government and say, well, look, we're fair dinkum. We've made moves to provide more provision for parking and all of that. So it gives us the opportunity to do that and move forward, and makes a statement to the community as well that we're serious and that we're not going to be held to ransom. We're not playing games with this. We're fair income about this. We need to get on with it. So hopefully we can have those sorts of discussions at the briefing session.
Councillor Halstead.
I've got no compunction in saying that the current state government is inept, in my view, in terms of non-decision making, and it's got two government departments, one of which should know what the other one's doing, and they're prepared to sit there and listen to one person sitting in Sydney trains that's obviously gloating over this, I believe. Be careful there. He probably is gloating just the same in terms of holding up a council again. This seems to be the go. I would just love it if you go to one of them TV shows. I watch, every now and again I watch TV, and I don't do it too often, but I've almost been converted to watching Current Affair every night. My God. I had to a couple of times, and I thought, gee, they're onto it here. That's about the only thing I look at. And they do take cases like this, and my God, they get results. You know, it's high time someone in councils in New South Wales stood up to the state government in terms of this sort of ineptitude. Because here it is, on the one hand they say, here's a grant, but then if there's a little problem with it, someone on, oh no, you now haven't got the grant. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. So the Premier, of all people, should get that message. Would I be surprised you got nowhere with Toole? Definitely not. I've seen him operate before in other areas, and I'm not sure that he would be the type that would be proactive in an issue like this, but nevertheless, who knows? You've got nowhere, you're getting nowhere, so I think you keep going the way you are, bang, hit them. And let's go up and stand outside Parliament, because quite frankly, I've had an absolute gutful of this current government, a gutful of it, right? I've watched this, and now you're going to get another 4 years of the same thing, where they have the kitty to hand out a bit here and every now and again to please you, you know, pork barrelling, because that's what it is. And I think they've done a really good job, to be quite frank, in terms of the money they're giving out. But let's get serious. Here's an issue which is important to this area, except for 0.17% of the community which don't want it, so they're quite happy and supported by others sitting around this table, prepared to stymie this development. Let's get on with it, because I'd like to see a shovel in the ground before the end of this term. And be quite frank, before Christmas, because otherwise, one, we look like fools. This guy over here thinks it's fantastic we don't get anywhere, and that is you, Councillor Scandrett, and you can jump up and down as much as you like. This government has got to be held to account in terms of this one. Absolute inefficiency. One government department, infrastructure, and then the other Sydney Trains. My God, Sydney Trains telling Infrastructure New South Wales what to do over a small piece of land. It's incredible, the stories I've heard from Barry here.
No bigger than this.
Just unbelievable. And so the negotiating skills he's had and tried to get, and you've got this person, a bureaucrat, a classic state government bureaucrat, holding it up.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett.
Well, there you go. It's becoming more and more apparent that it's a project which is not moving forward. And the reason I seconded Councillor Turlin's motion is we want to find out, all of us, I believe, it's incumbent upon us to find out where we are. And this has been very good, the various statements made around the room here, Mr Mayor, because some of those issues are now being ventilated. Now let's look at that. If it's a faceless bureaucrat, and in fact it wasn't. I know that bureaucrat has been named previously. If it's departments, if it's ministers, it's MPs, well, at what point do we cut our losses and go? This project, the $7.5 million from it, could be used on another major project. I still rather, if we're not going to build stage 2 of Station Street, rather fancy looking at the thought bubble being Old South Road, which was brought to us in a briefing session for the budget. I'd like to see that, because that would really get some traffic out of the Highlands all the way to Almerton. But there's so many competing priorities, and this project is a number that I maintain is 42 million or thereabouts on it. Like that. Look, I'm speaking, but it's on its way to 50, in my opinion. In my opinion. But anyway, when it all comes out, don't interrupt me, Mr. Mayor, please. Right? When it all comes out, and we'll say, what value did we get for that? Right? So this motion's a good motion. This motion is good in terms of the fact it's going to put some stuff on the blackboard, some timelines, some details, and it's all going to happen on the 11th of September. And as you know, I had a motion to get some clarity on things in this finance meeting that's coming. That's not going to happen, but I tell you what, it should be, because a hell of a lot of this project is unfunded at this point.
Thank you, and I'll remind councillors we've got 2 minutes to go before we have to go for an extension of time.
Motion be put.
Did you want to speak?
The only thing is I can't see the point. We're having a briefing session, so I won't be supporting the motion. I put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand.
The motion, you mean?
Yeah, the motion. Councillors Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin, Turland and Scandrett. Those against? I declare the motion carried, as there's no further business. I thank everybody for their attendance and declare the meeting closed. Are they the official ones to be signed? Doesn't matter, I've signed that one. I think